Chapter 609. You've gotten into big trouble. Cho Zifei immediately shouted at Kan Yi. Do you know who the other party is? Wind Moon Sect's young sect master. Wind Moon Sect has a heaven-tier elite overseeing it. Can you afford to provoke such a force? That's right, you'll get us killed. Tsing Jiansen also said. Kan Yi sneered and said, if your wives, mothers, and daughters were in such a situation, could you guys also watch so coldly and say such words? Everyone was silent, but the expression on their faces couldn't be more clear. Didn't they never encounter such a situation? What was the point in assuming? Qin Lianyu smiled and said, although our Dark Glory Valley's overall strength isn't as good as Wind Moon Sect's, it's not something they can casually bully. This matter is destined to be a grudge between the younger generation, and it's impossible for someone too strong to intervene, or else it'll trigger an all-out war between the two sections. Hearing her say so, everyone's hearts settled slightly. Let's go, this is still Wind Moon Sect's territory. Although it's not the core area, I heard there's a peak flower blossom tier elite overseeing it, and it's not easy to deal with. Qin Lianyu said again. Her temperament was elegant, she was beautiful, and she was born with the air of a leader, so she immediately became everyone's center and played a leading role. Everyone hurriedly nodded. This was still Wind Moon Sect's territory, so they quickly fled. They didn't dare to take the main road, and deviated into the forest on the side. They didn't fly either, as it consumed origin power and wasn't necessarily fast. They just ran on the ground, hidden, fast, and energy-saving. At night, they stopped to rest, and started a fire to roast dry rations and dried meat as they talked. So you guys are also going to the Restore Heaven Academy? Qin Lianyu listened to everyone, nodded, and said, I'm also going to the Restore Heaven Academy, and ended up encountering Hu Qingfang half a month ago. He kept pestering me, but fortunately, I encountered your help. Clearly, only Kan Yi made a move, and the others even blamed him afterward, but she knew how to conduct herself, so she obviously wouldn't mention it and make the atmosphere awkward. Some people looked ashamed, while Cho Zifei was pleased with himself, as if it was really as the other said, that he had lent a hand in the time of danger, and that it wasn't even Kan Yi who did it, but him. Miss Qin, you don't need to worry. If that Hu Qingfang dares to come again, I'll beat him into a sorry state, he said shamelessly. Who didn't know how to brag? In any case, it was to curry favor with a beauty, so he could brag to the heavens no matter how big the boast was. TFFF. The others still had some misgivings, and did not laugh out loud, but Hunyo did not know what it meant to give others face, and instantly burst into laughter. Little girl, what are you laughing at? Cho Zifei had boasted to the heavens, and what he was most afraid of was being exposed and slapped in the face. Therefore, when the little girl laughed like this, he became angry out of humiliation and glared at her. Isn't it funny? Kan Yi drew his saber, glaring furiously at Cho Zifei. Such a cute girl. Qin Lianyu reached out to hug Hunyo. Although this little girl had a big flowery face painted, it still couldn't hide her mischievousness, and everyone who saw her loved her. Ugly girl, don't have the delusion of hugging Lord Nyo. Hunyo hurriedly retreated, looking like she was avoiding an inauspicious event. However, she obeyed Ling Han's orders and didn't use her power recklessly, so how could she avoid a middle-stage flower blossom tier cultivator's attack? She was instantly hugged by Qin Lianyu, and her small head was buried in Qin Lianyu's towering chest. Nyo's going to suffocate to death, ugly girl, hurry up and move your fat away from Nyo's face, or else Nyo's going to flip out. Hunyo danced and shouted. Cho Zifei and the other four men couldn't help but be envious, thinking that if they could switch places with Hunyo, instantly, blood almost spurted out of their noses. Qin Lianyu also couldn't help but laugh, and released her hands. Hunyo hurriedly fled behind Ling Han, hiding in his embrace, and said to Ling Han in a sweet voice, this ugly girl wants to smother Nyo to death with her fat, can Nyo beat her into a pig's head? Truly despicable, actually plotting to harm the cute Nyo. Having the fat on her chest mentioned twice, Qin Lianyu's pretty face blushed a little. This little girl was cute, but her words were too. What was fat? It was clearly two firm and upright mountain peaks. What did it have to do with fat? At most, they were a bit bigger. Qin Lianyu was still quite pleased with this, and sometimes felt pity for herself in the mirror, and even had a bit of hidden bitterness. Who knew which man would take advantage of her in the future? Ling Han smiled, and said, "Forget it, she also likes you, so be magnanimous and don't bicker with her." Hunyao bit her finger and thought for a while, then said, "All right, Niao is a magnanimous person, so I won't bicker with that ugly girl." She said so, but her gleaming eyes obviously didn't let it go so easily. The others didn't know what this little girl was capable of, and they all laughed loudly, feeling that children's words carried no harm. If they knew how terrifying Qin Lianyu, a middle-stage flower blossom tier warrior, was, they reckoned she wouldn't dare say that. In terms of food, Hunyao definitely wouldn't mistreat herself. She took out the food from the spatial ring, which was vegetables grown in the Black Tower and beast meat raised. The taste was so fresh and delicious that it instantly made people salivate. Zhou Zifei and the others already smelled it 3 days ago, but were too embarrassed to ask a little girl for food, so now they could only hurry up and swallow their saliva. However, Qin Lianyu really liked Hunyao. She walked over without minding and said, "Beautiful Niao, can you give big sister a piece?" Hunyao tilted her head and considered, then said, "All right." She separated a small piece of meat, wrapped it with raw vegetables, and handed it to Qin Lianyu, and said, "This is a new way of eating that Niao invented, called vegetable-wrapped meat." Qin Lianyu opened her small mouth and directly bit this piece of vegetable-wrapped meat, slowly chewing. She originally just wanted to tease Hunyao and wasn't really greedy, but as she chewed, her pretty face immediately changed color. How could it be so delicious? The lightness of the vegetables fused with the roasted meat's fatness, complementing each other's advantages even more, stimulating her taste buds and making her feel as if she'd touched some kind of orgasm. Instantly, her cheeks flushed red, and for a moment, her brain seemed to have short-circuited. There was only endless stimulation, making her involuntarily moan like a cat's cry, tickling one's heart. Zhou Zifei and the other 4 men almost howled together. This moan was really too erotic, making them all want to transform into vicious wolves and pounce on the charming little sheep in front of them. Unfortunately, this little sheep still possessed terrifying strength. If they didn't have a death wish, how would they dare to pounce? Qin Lianyu came back to her senses after a long while, and couldn't help but blush. She actually moaned because she ate a mouthful of food. How embarrassing! No matter how delicious it was, it couldn't be like this, as if she hadn't eaten it in 3 lifetimes. Hee hee. Hunyao finally revealed a little devil-like smile. After eating such delicious food, you definitely want to eat more, right? I won't give it to you, you'll die of cravings, actually daring to use 2 lumps of fat to press your Lord Niao. Chapter 610. As expected, Qin Lianyu couldn't control herself at all towards such delicacies, and also liked little girls like Hunyao, so she lowered her status and begged for food from her. However, Hunyao wouldn't pay attention to her, minding her own business as she ate until the juices overflowed, making everyone continuously swallow their saliva. All right, with your pitiful appearance, I'll give you another piece." In the end, Hunyao gave another piece of meat to Qin Lianyu, still wrapped in vegetables, and passed it into Qin Lianyu's small mouth. She didn't have good intentions, still wanting Qin Lianyu to remember. The little girl was very vengeful. As expected, Qin Lianyu couldn't sleep that night. It was fine if she didn't taste the freshness, but after eating, she didn't have a full appetite, making her feel even more tormented. However, it also made her very curious as to what kind of meat this was, and how this vegetable was grown, for it to be so delicious. On the second day, Qin Lianyu stared at Ling Han, asking him about the origins of the beast meat and vegetables. Ling Han was annoyed, and said, "That's not beast meat, but human meat. As for vegetables, they're obviously grown with humans as fertilizer," he said it awe-inspiringly, making Qin Lianyu's pretty face twitch continuously, and she immediately retreated in defeat, making Hunyao hold her belly in laughter, feeling that she finally got her revenge. Qin Lianyu obviously wouldn't believe it. She'd never eaten human meat, but as a martial artist, how could she not have seen human meat? It wasn't like this. She could conclude that the beast meat she ate yesterday was aromatic deer, a beast meat known for its delicious meat. She'd eaten it many times, but none of them were as delicious as yesterday. She was truly worried that after eating yesterday's meat, would she have the appetite to eat anything else in the future? Qiu Zifei and the others were very attentive to Qin Lianyu, surrounding her in every way possible to curry favor. Not only was this girl beautiful like a fairy, but her identity was also unordinary. She was the youngest disciple of the Dark Glory Valley's master. If one could marry her, then their own status would rise greatly, and even the family behind them would rise accordingly. In the world of martial art, the spiritual infant tier, the deity transformation tier, and the heaven tier, the difference between each tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and the hierarchy was extremely strict. The 5 of them only had backgrounds in the deity transformation realm, so they naturally wanted to gain connections with the direct disciples of the Dark Glory Valley. Moreover, just Qin Lianyu's absolute beauty was enough. However, how could Qin Lianyu pay attention to them? She was polite, but only for Kenya's sake, or else why would she pay attention to these greedy and cowardly people? Aside from martial arts, what she liked the most was to find all kinds of delicacies, so she obviously couldn't forget Hunyo's food, and found Zhu Xianer. In her opinion, this food definitely wasn't prepared by the little girl herself, so the adults by her side could only be Ling Han and Zhu Xianer. However, Ling Han had already scared her off previously, so she obviously wouldn't go looking for trouble, so she could only look for Zhu Xianer. It was unknown what the 2 girls said, but they both started laughing tenderly. Very soon, they became extremely intimate, causing both Ling Han and Hunyo to click their tongues in wonder. Women, truly strange creatures. Ling Han shrugged. Yeah. Hunyo gnawed on her food while revealing a distressed expression, and said, that Nyo is so pitiful. If she grows up, she'll become such a strange woman, but if she doesn't grow up, how can she marry Ling Han? Ling Han laughed loudly, rubbed Hunyo's hair, and said, then Hunyo won't grow up, this is also quite good. There was always a knot in his heart. As Hunyo grew up, would that strange spirit base in her dantian replace her? That kind of existence was too terrifying. Just its might was enough to annihilate his heaven-tier divine sense, and Hunyo couldn't resist it at all. No, Nyo wants to marry Ling Han. Ling Han is Nyo's. Hunyo squeezed into Ling Han's embrace and hugged him tightly. Ah, you're going to strangle me to death. Ling Han cried out strangely. Hee hee. Hunyo laughed loudly. You guys are quite happy, huh? A cold laugh sounded, and a carriage actually flew over from the sky. With a turn, it stopped in front of them. The carriage that was 15 meters long and 9 meters tall was like a moving castle, and 4 beautiful women in revealing clothing sat in the driver's seat. Wind Moon Sect, Hu Qing Fong. He was here again. However, before everyone could ask, they heard an extremely loud moan coming from inside the carriage, wave after wave, like a wave. This was a woman's moan, hysterical, and the carriage even had an extremely high frequency of vibration. Those who were experienced obviously knew what was going on once they heard it, and instantly stared. Doing that kind of thing was so high profile. Ling Han covered Hunyo's ears, and revealed a displeased expression as he said, "Can ye?" Yes. Can ye immediately answered, and pounced out, brandishing his saber to strike. Xiao, 9 flashes of saber chi shot out, and with the long saber, turned into 10 streaks of light, slicing towards the carriage. How dare you! The 4 beautiful women leaped out one after another, meeting Can ye. Peng, 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 peng. In the fierce confrontation, the 4 beautiful women were defeated, but Kenya's attack was also neutralized. Ah! A long exhalation came from inside the carriage, and the violently shaking carriage immediately stopped. A woman was heard saying, young sect master's skills are getting better and better. This servant was almost killed by young sect master. Ha ha ha. Hu Qing Fong's proud laughter came from inside the carriage. Men love to hear praise from women like this the most. The carriage door opened, and 3 men and women actually walked out. It was actually a threesome before, really knowing how to play. Not only did the carriage shake, but also 3 people. The man was obviously Hu Qingfang. He was bare-chested, wearing only a loose pair of underwear, and in his arms was a woman whose clothes didn't cover her body, revealing her breasts everywhere. Next to him stood another woman who looked to be in her early 30s, maintaining herself quite well. Her skin was snow-white and tender, round and plump, and her buttocks were perky, plump and round. She wore a loose skirt. At first glance, it was fine, but when the mountain wind blew, the hem of the skirt fluttered, and the inside was actually completely bare, enough to make people cover their faces in embarrassment. Yang Yingshi. Yang Yingyun. Qin Lianyu exclaimed. Her gaze fell on the 2 women whose clothes didn't cover their bodies, revealing an intense fear. Be careful, these are the Wind Moon sect's 2 branch masters here, both at the peak of the flower blossom tier. TSK, 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 it's rare that Lady Qin still recognizes us sisters, what an honor. The standing beautiful woman said. She was Yang Yingyun, and the other one still in Hu Qingfang's arms was Yang Yingshi. Which? Qin Lianyu said disdainfully, her eyes full of contempt. Yang Yingyun giggled and allowed the mountain breeze to blow on her body. She said, what does a little girl who hasn't experienced the ways of the world know? A woman needs to be nourished by a man at all times in order to be beautiful. This way, Gidge, it's more convenient to do things. Pervert. Qin Lianyu reprimanded. Ken Yi, however, gave a long howl and charged towards the carriage. The order he received was to kill. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 611. Ling Han simply laid out a feast, using all kinds of precious meats and ingredients, including the meat of extremely high-level demonic beasts, 10,000-year-old treasured pearl, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng. He put them all together and cooked them in a pot. Although he didn't have any culinary skills, he couldn't deny that these ingredients were too precious. Just by cooking them together, a fresh aroma assailed the nostrils, causing one's appetite to whet. Helian Tianyun also drooled disappointingly, and said, 10,000-year-old treasured pearl, even I didn't get one back then, and dragon blood tyrant ginseng, I've only eaten one, they're all Nyo's, don't take them, Hu Nyo said fiercely. Only now did Helian Tianyun notice Hu Nyo. His eyes involuntarily lit up, and he said, little sister, have you been betrothed to someone else? What about me? He's just right for you. Peng, peng, peng. The consequence of his cheap mouth was naturally a beating. Hu Nyo didn't go easy on him, and beat him until he wanted to cry, making him extremely gloomy. In his last life, he was an invincible existence, so why was he beaten up by 3 people the moment he was born? Why didn't his dragon's might work again? Damn brat, could it be that this little girl is your daughter again? He screamed. Otherwise, how could she not be affected by his dragon's might? This was not only effective on the dragon race, but also had a powerful pressure on other races. However, it was not as effective as it was on the dragon race. Nyo is Ling Han's, Hu Nyo said fiercely, stepping on Helian Tianyun with her little feet until he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Helian Tianyun was gloomy. How could any good stuff be snatched away by Ling Han? His disciple with unparalleled talent was Ling Han's son, and this weird little beauty was also Ling Han's little wife. After it was cooked, everyone fought over the food. Even heaven-tier elites didn't dare to eat too much of such ingredients. At most, they would only drink a few mouthfuls of soup, or else their bodies would explode. However, Ling Han, Hu Nyo, Helian Sun Shui, and Helian Tianyun were all big eaters, eating to their heart's content. However, Helian Sun Shui was the first to be full. It wasn't that her stomach couldn't eat anymore, but rather that she couldn't handle any more energy essence, so she had to sit on the side and refine it. Ling Han, Hu Nyo, and Helian Tianyun were still eating madly, and didn't have the slightest intention of stopping. Helian Tianyun was even more gloomy, and said, I was nurtured by the true dragon's tooth, and my body is tyrannical. No matter how much energy there is, I won't explode, but what's with the 2 of you? You can actually eat more than I can. He felt that he was almost at his limit. After all, his current cultivation level was too low. It's useless. Hunyo rolled her eyes at him, meaning that he was too weak. Helian Tianyun could only be speechless. After eating a few more mouthfuls of meat, he could only sit on the side and begin to refine it. He was really a freak, breaking through a few small tiers in an instant, advancing into the gushing spring tier, and finally being able to compete with Ling Jianxue. But after that, the advancement of his tier wouldn't be so simple. After all, the higher the cultivation level, the more terrifying the energy required, especially from heaven tier to shattering void tier, which required a shocking amount of energy. But for him, it was only a matter of 1 or 2 years, or at most 2 or 3 years. Ling Han and Hunyo practically didn't have any obvious improvement. After all, their battle prowess had reached the heaven tier, so it was naturally difficult to improve further. Let's go, it's time to leave this place. Ling Han snapped his fingers, and after tidying up the pots and bowls and chopsticks, they walked back. Su Xiuran and the others should still be guarding the entrance, Ling Han said. This time, there's no terrain advantage, so we'll have to fight it out. Hey, this lord's. Helian Tianyun jumped out. He didn't believe that the world was full of freaks like Ling Han and Hunyo who weren't affected by his dragon's might. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, "Don't die right after you've been born. At least leave a few mystical powers for my son." You jinx! Helian Tianyun shouted in anger. Unfortunately, he no longer had the valor he once had, or else he would definitely teach this human a good lesson. He actually dared to look down on him, the great Lord Alternative Dragon. They arrived at the entrance, and sure enough, Su Xiuran and the others had already discovered the commotion. They all stood up and blocked the entrance. Helian Tianyun swaggered a few steps forward, and humphed. Juniors, why aren't you kneeling when you see this lord? Su Xiuran and the others already knew that Ling Han had a spatial divine tool, so they were naturally not surprised by the addition of a little brat and completely ignored him. Dong Ling said, "Ling Han, hand over the true dragon's tooth and the spatial divine tool. You should know that you definitely won't be able to leave this place alive." Helian Tianyun was furious. They were too despicable, again ignoring him. Moreover, if they wanted the true dragon's tooth, wasn't he the true dragon's tooth? He humphed. Wang, the dragon's might was unleashed, and it charged towards the four of them mightily. N. Yeah. Su Xiuran and the others all let out a muffled groan. Under the pressure of the dragon's might, their faces all turned pale. Even if they were all rulers of martial arts, under such dragon's might, they still had a feeling of difficulty breathing. Wang, Su Xiuran immediately revived the absolute saber, and an absolutely powerful saber intent circulated, instantly blocking the dragon's might. The Son of Lightning wasn't slow either, and similarly drew out the mountain and river axe. This precious tool shone, and also blocked the dragon's might. Helian Tianyun couldn't help but feel bitter in his mouth. His dragon's might was blocked again, so how could he endure this? Thankfully, these two juniors didn't block it with their own abilities, but with two spirit tools. Otherwise, he would really be crying. He stared at the two spirit tools for a while, and muttered, "Those are replicas of the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe." With this recognition, he finally breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. The first master of the absolute saber was even an elite of the immortal realm, and that mountain and river axe was formed from the realm power and source power of this realm. Even if it was just a replica, it still had some special might, and it was reasonable that it could rival his dragon's might. Su Xiuran and the Son of Lightning could resist the dragon's might, but the Small Sword Emperor and Dong Ling couldn't. Even if they also had level 10 spirit tools bestowed by their elders, they had no effect on the dragon's might. After all, this was an alternative dragon that had once been invincible in the world. Su Xiuran and the Son of Lightning hurriedly guarded Dong Ling and the Small Sword Emperor, lest Ling Han took the opportunity to kill them. In this way, their battle prowess instantly dropped to 2. Although they still had the absolute saber and the mountain and river axe, the threat was greatly reduced after all. Ling Han laughed loudly, and used the Revere Life Sword to open the way, charging out. Although Su Xiu ran and the Son of Lightning attacked with all their might, suppressing the Revere Life Sword wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Ling Han didn't linger in battle either, and left with his people. Su Xiu ran and the others didn't know whether to chase after them or not. If they chased after them, what if Ling Han and the others turned back and attacked them? What would Dong Ling, and the Small Sword Emperor do? If they didn't chase after them, they must have obtained the true dragon's tooth. How could they just watch them leave? But in the end, they still didn't chase after them. After a long while, the Small Sword Emperor and Dong Shui recovered from the trembling of the dragon's might, and they both revealed expressions of fear. How could this aura be so terrifying? The situation has already exceeded the scope of our control. Immediately return to the middle state, and ask the sect's ultimate elites to attack and kill Ling Han, and take back the true dragon's tooth. That little boy is also very terrifying, actually able to emit an incredibly terrifying dragon's might. We can't let him go either. Chapter 6:12. Xiu, she was like a bolt of lightning, fast beyond the limits of what the naked eye could capture. At least, it was extremely hard for spiritual infant tier cultivators to catch. Yang Yingshi had just crossed into the spiritual infant tier, and who would be wary of a 7 or 8-year-old little girl? She didn't put the slightest bit of attention on Hunyo. Her vision blurred, and Hunyo had already dashed in front of her. She cried out inwardly, and still wanted to bounce back, but Hunyo already threw a punch, smashing it on her chin. Peng, Yang Yingshi's entire person was sent flying, and the terrifying impact hit her, causing her to be knocked unconscious. Hunyo bounced, but caught up to her at an even faster speed. Riding on her shoulder, she pressed down on her head with both hands and twisted. Ka, the crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Losing the defense of origin power, a spiritual infant tier's physique was extremely fragile, and her head was forcibly plucked off by Hunyo. Yang Yingshi instantly woke up again. Her eyes opened, revealing a terrified expression, and her headless body flailed about. Spiritual infant tier cultivator's chi was very long, and she actually didn't die immediately after her head was plucked off. Moreover, if her head was reattached now, she could still recover. Hunyo landed, and with a casual wave, the head was thrown out by her. Yang Yingshi's body hurriedly ran over, blood continuously spurting from her severed neck. However, she only ran a dozen steps before crashing to the ground, and her limbs twitched a few more times before forever stopping. A dignified spiritual infant tier cultivator's head was easily plucked off by a little girl, and killed on the spot. The whole place was silent. Qin Lianyu, He Lan Yun, Chou Zifei, and the others, which one of them didn't know Hunyo? They even ate with her. But now, their legs were trembling, and they had the urge to faint. This little girl was too terrifying. Qin Lianyu recalled that yesterday, the little girl was still very displeased, asking if Ling Han could kill her. At the time, it naturally sounded like a joke, but now, the little girl was clearly serious. Unknowingly, she had actually circled around the gates of hell, causing her to immediately break out in a cold sweat. She couldn't help but feel an incomparable chill. Ah! Hu Qingfang and Yang Yingyun finally came back to their senses and hurriedly escaped into the carriage. Let's go, let's go. He urged the 4 beautiful women to drive the carriage away. You want to kill the cute Nyo Nyo, Nyo is angry. Hunyo broke into a run and chased after the carriage. Her body turned into lightning, and in a flash, she arrived above the carriage and threw a punch. Wang, a screen of light opened up, blocking her fist. After all, this was on the level of the spiritual infant tier, and the little girl was only in the high level of the flower blossom tier, so her fists could not break it. Only then did Hu Qingfang calm down a little, and he said sternly, "Ha ha, come. You'll have to cultivate for another 10 million years to kill this young master." Hunyo flew into a rage, and opened her small mouth to bite at the screen of light. Ka-cha, even this screen of light could not resist Hunyo's teeth, and instantly shattered. However, this was activated by the origin crystal, and the shattered light screen immediately began to repair itself, as if it was in a race with Hunyo's destruction. In a short period of time, the two sides seemed to be evenly matched. However, Hu Qingfang was scared out of his wits again, and hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up, hurry up." The four beautiful women hurriedly urged the carriage to speed into the sky. Xiao, the carriage quickly disappeared into the horizon. Qin Lianyu and the others still didn't move, dumbstruck. The impact they suffered was too great. After a while, with a flash of lightning, Hunyo had already returned. She pouted in displeasure, put her hands on her hips, and said, "Not fun, they ran away, you're already fierce enough, killing a spiritual infantier elite in one strike and breaking open a spiritual infantier's defense with a bite. If this was known, it could shock the whole world." At this time, everyone seemed to have been struck by an alarm, and they all moved towards Hunyo. This time, there was no longer the slightest bit of contempt in their eyes. This was a little demon king, enough to kill them. "After a fight, I'm hungry." Hunyo stuck to Ling Han, and said fawningly, "Can Nyo eat another piece of meat?" "No, you've already eaten enough today." Ling Han shook his head, resolutely refusing. "Eat another small piece, just a small piece." Hunyo said coquettishly. "No means no." Ling Han was very resolute. "Stingy, Nyo is going to turn bad." Hunyo pouted, getting angry. Everyone broke into a sweat for Ling Han. This little demon king forcibly snapped off a spiritual infantier's head, and you actually dared to defy her. Aren't you afraid she'll flip out and twist your neck off to use it as a wine pot? However, what surprised everyone was that Hunyo actually didn't make a big fuss, and not long later, stuck to Ling Han again, begging bitterly, and when she finally got a piece of jerky, she was extremely happy. This was simply inconceivable. They were all tempted. So this little girl was a glutton, and could be bribed with food. If they could abduct this little girl, then she now had the strength to kill low-level spiritual infantier warriors. How strong would she be when she grew to 10 or 20 years old? Extremely profitable. They hurriedly took out jerky to seduce Hunyo, thinking that Ling Han was truly an idiot. Such a strong hatchet man obviously had to be won over, and he actually couldn't bear to part with a few pieces of meat. Didn't you hear the old saying, "You can't trap a wolf if you don't give up your child"? She didn't want your child, just a few pieces of meat. However, how could they move Hunyo? They were all kicked back by the little girl. If it wasn't for her current murderous nature being somewhat restrained, she'd definitely slaughter all of them that dared to be so annoying. Qin Lianyu, however, focused her beautiful eyes on Ling Han. She recalled Yang Yingyun's inexplicable consecutive stumbles earlier, which was an inconceivable thing on an expert. Now, combined with Hunyo's freakishness, she had a bold conjecture. If it wasn't for Ling Han also possessing terrifying strength, he'd be able to restrain this savage little girl. "Ugly, you're staring at Nyo's Ling Han, are you having some bad thoughts?" Hunyo suddenly appeared in front of Qin Lianyu, her small face full of vigilance. She really couldn't be careless. There would always be people who had ideas about her, Ling Han. Qin Lianyu didn't think much of it, thinking that the little girl didn't speak clearly and said Ling Han's name incorrectly. She smiled faintly, and said, "Nyo Nyo, how is big sister ugly?" "Ugly everywhere." Hunyo said solemnly, pointing at Zhu Xian'er, and said, "Not as good as that ugly, tell me, where aren't you ugly?" Qin Lianyu couldn't help but smile. Her beauty surpassed Zhu Xian'er by who knew how many times, but she obviously wouldn't say it, and only said, "Nyo Nyo, is your Lingyun powerful?" "Of course it's powerful as Nyo." Hunyo immediately said, her face full of pride. "Oh." Qin Lianyu's beautiful eyes lit up. She knew that Ling Han definitely wasn't as ordinary as he appeared. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 613. The party continued on their way. After this episode, obviously no one dared to make sarcastic remarks towards Ling Han. They weren't afraid of Ling Han, but of Hunyo. This little girl was too clingy to Ling Han, and whoever spoke ill of Ling Han would explode the little girl. This girl was a fiend, and didn't hold back when she killed. They were even more envious of Ling Han, actually hugging such a thick thigh. Each and every one of them was filled with dissatisfaction towards Ling Han. Why, just 2 days later, they were caught up again. It was still Hu Qingfang. Ling Han was really quite impressed. This guy was really not afraid of death. He had already escaped twice and still dared to come back. No, it should be said how perverted this guy was to be so obsessed with Qin Lianyu. Ha ha ha, this young master is back again. It was still the same carriage, still controlled by the same 4 beautiful women, but the difference was that no obscene sounds came from the carriage this time. Should I clap? Ling Han said with a smile. Clapping means kowtowing, don't even think about living. Hu Qingfang's voice came. The carriage opened, and he and an old man walked out side by side. Ling Han turned pale with fright and said, I really didn't think that your Wind Moon sect is not only perverted, but also homosexual. I really can't bear to look straight at it. Dirty, truly too dirty. Nonsense. Hu Qingfang hurriedly jumped up. Their Wind Moon sect obviously didn't fear romance. On the contrary, they took pride in it, thinking that the lust of men and women was also a kind of natural law that could be spat out by men and women. Then when it's a lone man and a lone man, you two squeezing together, don't you have? Ling Han said deliberately. Junior, impudent. The old man immediately snorted, as if squeezed out of metal and stone, full of sharpness and killing power. Zhou Zifei and the others immediately bled from their ears, eyes, and noses. Only Qin Lianyu was an exception, because her tier was higher. Of course, Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er, and Hunyo didn't either. Ling Han and Hunyo's battle prowess was strong enough, while Zhu Xian'er received Ling Han's protection. Extreme explosion killing king, Duan Mingde. Qin Lianyu immediately exclaimed. Kaka, little girl, I didn't expect you to recognize me. TSK, you're really not bad looking. If it weren't for young sect master having sex with you, even I would want to dual cultivate with you. The old man laughed strangely, his gaze towards Qin Lianyu filled with desire. Extreme explosion killing king, Duan Mingde, peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, Qin Lianyu said again. Everyone was in despair. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, this was too strong. Though Hunyo was very ferocious, she was only in the flower blossom tier, after all. Being able to kill Yang Yingshi was only because she had taken her opponent by surprise. Who would have thought that a little girl of 7 or 8 years old could explode with such speed? But now, Duan Mingde would definitely be on guard, and he was in the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, so his battle prowess was definitely not something that Yang Yingshi, who had just crossed into this tier, could compare to. It was over. This thought appeared in everyone's mind once again. Lord Duan, apart from those few women, kill everyone else. Hu Qingfang shouted. Yes, young sect master. Duan Mingde received the order, and his gaze turned towards everyone eerily as he mumbled, who should I kill first? They clearly knew that Duan Mingde was only toying with them, but a chill still rose up in Zhou Zifei and the others' hearts, and they couldn't help but look towards others, not wishing to be the first to be slaughtered. Kaka, this old man is asking you guys, who should I kill first? Duan Mingde said sinisterly. He liked to play with people's hearts the most, making people fight amongst themselves, and then he would kill them, enjoying the other party's expression of despair and regret. Zhou Zifei and the others looked at each other, and pointed towards Ling Han in unison, saying, it's him. Don't fall for his trick. He Lan Yun shouted. No matter what, he won't let us go, fight it out with him. Fight what, you won't die. Zhou Zifei shouted. He Lan Yun was almost angered to death. How much better would her end be than death? Ling Han sighed, and said, what's the saying? If you don't do it, you won't die. Originally, since we're in the same profession, I didn't mind saving you guys, but now, even if others don't kill me, I'll slaughter you guys. Such arrogance. Just a spiritual ocean tier warrior. Cho Zifei and the others all snorted coldly. They could only find a shred of confidence in front of Ling Han now. This brat only abducted a strange girl with super strong strength, and he really thought he was a spiritual infant tier elite. Ha ha ha. Duan Mingde laughed loudly. He loved this kind of internal fight the most. Lord Duan, please attack quickly, Hu Qingfang urged. Duan Mingde looked at Ling Han and said, since everyone decided to kill you first, this old man plans to follow everyone's opinion and kill you first. If you have that kind of strength, then bring it on, Ling Han said indifferently. Ha, such an arrogant youngster. Duan Mingde sneered, his gaze sweeping over Hun Yo. It's this girl who killed Yang Yunshi. When he heard the news, his first reaction was that it was absurd, and now that he saw it with his own eyes, this feeling was even stronger. Was it possible? Little girl, attack, let this old man see what skills you have, he provoked. Hun Yo snorted, and said, Ling Han will take care of you, Nyo won't attack. Duan Mingde didn't have any strange reaction to this name. After all, this was the middle state, and perhaps the news of the divine treasure trove only spread among absolute elites, or among some geniuses of the younger generation. Ha, this brat is really that powerful. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, whether powerful or not, we'll know after we fight. Arrogant, very arrogant. This old man likes to kill people like you the most, exciting. Duan Mingde laughed loudly, and stretched out his right hand. Vein-like patterns shone, emitting a terrifying pressure. The peak stage of the spiritual infant tier was so powerful. Ling Han was unafraid, and said with a smile, are you trying to scare me? Not scare, this is real pressure, Duan Mingde said with a smile. Duan Mingde said with a smile. His right hand pressed towards the empty space where Ling Han was. Hong, endless origin power surged, turning into a vast ocean that pressed down towards Ling Han. Are you seeking death? Ling Han's figure flashed, and lightning overflowed. Xiao, he appeared in front of Duan Mingde, and punched out. So fast. Everyone was greatly shocked. What kind of speed was this, almost comparable to Hun Yo's? Although Duan Mingde didn't believe in Hun Yo's strength, he was still somewhat wary, but towards Ling Han, he really didn't have any. A mere spiritual ocean tier, it couldn't be more obvious. Could he overturn the heavens? However, Ling Han's attack was as fast as lightning, giving him no time to defend at all. He only had time to tilt his face slightly, and pang, his cheek was still brushed by the wind from the fist, and instantly, blood seeped out. He hurriedly sprung backwards, but as he retreated, Ling Han advanced, following him like a shadow, always staying half a foot in front of him, making him tremble with fear. Damn it! Chapter 614. Duan Mingde retreated hurriedly, while Ling Han advanced hurriedly. The two stuck closely to each other, like a pair of lovey-dovey lovers. However, Duan Mingde didn't feel romantic, and only felt his scalp go numb. How could this youngster's speed be so fast, as if he was his shadow that couldn't be shaken off no matter what, making him shudder with fear. This wasn't some spiritual ocean tier, but a flower blossom tier expert, and a high-level one at that, one that was close to the peak. However, the problem was, even a peak-stage flower blossom tier cultivator shouldn't be so fierce. He was a peak-stage spiritual infant tier cultivator, and could kill any flower blossom tier cultivator several hundred times with a single finger, so how could he be forced to retreat repeatedly? Ling Han wasn't just a matter of getting close. As his fists moved, he launched a series of violent attacks. Pang, 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 one punch after another was like a raging wave, forcing Duan Mingde to not only defend while retreating, but also constantly tilt his head to avoid being hit by Ling Han. One retreated, one advanced, and in an instant, over 100 moves had passed. Everyone was dumbfounded. It turned out that Ling Han was also a fierce person. Earlier, Hun Yo killed a low-level spiritual infant tier cultivator with a single punch, and although Ling Han's battle record wasn't so dazzling, his opponent was a peak-stage spiritual infant tier cultivator. Now that Ling Han attacked, everyone could obviously feel his high-level flower blossom tier aura, and they had the same thoughts as Duan Mingde. High-level flower blossom tier cultivators shouldn't be so fierce. Considering that Hunyo had shown extraordinary splendor before, they finally had an idea in their hearts. This was the so-called freak able to surpass tiers to battle, and surpass a whole major tier at that. Truly fuck you terrifying. Only Qin Lianyu had guessed it before, so her degree of shock wasn't as great as the others, but she still widened her beautiful eyes. In comparison, did a genius like her still have the face to hang the word genius? No, she was still a genius, but Hunyo and Ling Han had already surpassed the level of geniuses and entered the level of freaks. Ah! Duan Mingde roared. Hong, purple mist rose from his body, surrounding Ling Han. For a moment, Ling Han didn't know what was going on. Naturally, he didn't dare to be surrounded by this dense fog. His figure moved, and with a flash of lightning, he appeared more than 100 feet away, coldly staring at the other party. Peak stage of the spiritual infant tier is nothing more than this, he said calmly. The thunderclap ninth heaven combined with the demon fairy step allowed his speed to reach the level of the deity transformation tier, and was even more agile. Duan Mingde was so angry that he cried out loudly. He stretched out his hand and wiped his face. Seeing that his hand was full of blood, he could not help but become even more furious. Just now, he had been bombarded by Ling Han continuously. Though none of his blows had landed solidly, the wind from the fists had still managed to cut his face. My handsome face, he cried in exasperation. Ling Han was amused, and said, could it be that you still want to use this old face to pick up girls? TSK, then I really admire you a bit. What kind of aunties would be attracted by your old face? You could still do it, are you sending warmth to the aunties? Impudent junior, I will suppress and kill you. Duan Mingde charged out again. This time, he drew out a brocade. It looked like a silk handkerchief, but was much larger. On it were embroidered patterns of men and women having fun. As it fluttered in the wind, it was as if the people on it had come alive and were in the midst of a fierce battle. This wasn't an illusion, there were even decadent sounds that could make one's heart flustered. Spirit Tool. However, Wind Moon Sect's Spirit Tool was also extremely obscene and evil, actually using erotic pictures to disturb one's willpower. Kill! Duan Mingde roared fiercely. Show! From within the brocade, there were also rays of grand light that shot towards Ling Han, and Duan Mingde himself also pounced, a terrifying aura spreading as the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier's strength was fully displayed. Ling Han laughed loudly. If the opponent was Small Saber King, then he definitely couldn't rival him. After all, he could surpass tiers to battle, and so could Small Saber King. At most, he could surpass more tiers, but he definitely couldn't make up for the gap of a major tier. However, Duan Mingde was different. Although he was at the peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, his battle prowess was only around 10 stars, so he was completely unafraid. Unleashing the thunderclap ninth heaven, he turned into a flash of lightning and appeared in front of Duan Mingde, throwing two fists again. Brat, you dare! Duan Mingde waved purple mist, once again enveloping Ling Han. This was the Wind Moon Sect's secret art. For outsiders, this could confuse the opponent's mind, causing them to become lustful and lose all rationality. However, for Wind Moon Sect's people, this was a tonic that could excite their spirits and clear their minds. Ling Han sealed all the pores on his body with origin power, and this time, he no longer retreated, but attacked head-on. Peng, the two battled fiercely. That brocade-like spirit tool was very powerful, continuously shooting light beams and launching attacks at Ling Han. This also reached the level of a high-level spiritual infant tier, and couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han had to dodge, his true tier was only at the flower blossom tier. With the help of this spirit tool, Duan Mingde finally managed to fight to a draw with Ling Han. Everyone was shocked. One had to know that Ling Han was currently unarmed, and if he also drew out his spirit tool, wouldn't he immediately be able to gain the upper hand? This was too terrifying. How could there be such a kick-ass flower blossom tier warrior? Cho Zifei and the other 4 men's faces were pale. If Wind Moon Sect won this battle, then they were definitely finished. However, if Ling Han won, would he let them go since they forced Ling Han to die earlier? Dying left and right, so what was the point of staying? They all retreated, wanting to slip away. As for that heaven-mending academy, they'd go next year. Hang, where do you guys want to go? Hunyo put her hands on her hips, glaring fiercely. Kinyi raised his long saber horizontally, overflowing with killing intent. If it was only Kinyi, then the 5 of them could break in together, but with Hunyo, they could only die. Cho Zifei laughed dryly, and said, Kinyi, what do you mean? Since they'd already fallen out, Kinyi simply laid his cards on the table, and said, before young Master Han decides, no one is allowed to leave, young Master Han. Ling Yun, Cho Zifei and the others finally knew that Ling Yun wasn't that person's real name, but they were also very unfamiliar with the name young Master Han. Could this person be called Ling Han or Han Yun? They didn't seem to have heard of it. Kinyi, are you being ungrateful? Cho Zifei immediately roared. We accepted you into this circle, and this is your repayment to us. Truly a despicable person. Tsing Jiansen also reprimanded. Kinyi sneered, and said, then what do I have to do to not be a despicable person? Let us go. Yu Yuanming said hurriedly. He believed that Kinyi should be able to persuade Hunyo. A group of cowards, I'm ashamed to be associated with you guys. Kinyi said coldly, his killing intent even more blazing. Kinyi, we're all considered friends, forget it. He Lan Yun stood out to mediate. She was considering the overall situation. After all, the 6 of them came from the same place, and everyone's backers were inextricably linked. That's right. Cho Zifei nodded, and suddenly made a move, grabbing He Lan Yun and pressing the blade against her neck. Let us go immediately, or else this woman will die here. Chapter 6:15. A palm strike from a shattering void tier elite was only equivalent to a somersault. Everyone's expression changed. Did this guy have the life of an unkillable cockroach? A shattering void tier elite's attack was actually completely unscathed. Oh, there was indeed some dust on his body, but that was all. Not to mention Ling Han, even if it was a shattering void tier elite, they would probably be heavily injured, or even killed in an instant under such an attack. No, this had to be fake. Su Xiaorant's eyes popped out, and his mouth opened wide, even spitting out his tongue. Don't blame this prodigy for losing his composure, and it was precisely because he was a prodigy of the present age that he deeply knew how difficult it was to cultivate physique to the level of 10th tier rare metal. The sea race was powerful enough, wasn't it? Every single one of them had ancestral blood, especially the royal family. Relying on true dragon bloodline, not only did the possibility of advancing into the shattering void tier greatly increase, they were also all-body cultivators, and their physiques were tough. In a battle of the same tier, they could be said to have the upper hand. However, very few kings of the sea race could reach the level of 10th tier rare metal in terms of physique. This step was too difficult. Not only did it require true dragon bloodline, it also had to be extremely pure. For example, in the 4 seas, only the common ruler, the AO family, had 2 or 3 people who cultivated physique to this level. Additionally, that alternative dragon in the ghostly dragon cave was also different. Its ancestral blood was pure, and it had once stepped into this level. The reason why that alternative dragon couldn't be killed even by immortals descending to the lower realm was simple, it was because its physique was 10th tier rare metal, and was too difficult to kill. This kind of physique could only be slowly refined like 10th tier rare metal after being captured, but that alternative dragon possessed battle prowess of 20 stars of shattering void tier in the first place, so how could it possibly be slowly refined? However, Ling Han was presently only in the deity transformation tier, yet his physique had charged up to the level of 10th tier rare metal. How could people not lose their composure at this? Su Xiu ran sighed internally. His defeat to Ling Han was really not the slightest bit undeserved. If Ling Han could be killed by him, that 10th tier rare metals physique would really be too worthless. The Beast Snake King had lived for so long, and was also one of the strongest elites of the present age. Naturally, he would not blink even if the sky collapsed before his eyes. He looked coldly at Ling Han, and said, I really never thought that your physique had actually reached such a level, old beast snake, do you still want to kill me? After Ling Han brushed off the dirt on his body, he once again flew back into the skies. In truth, a strong physique was only one of the special characteristics of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, but the more powerful aspect was its recovery ability. The severed limbs of the body of Diamond would automatically regrow, and there was no need to circulate the indestructible Heaven's Scroll at all. How terrifying was that? He naturally would not tell the other party about this. The Beast Snake King smirked coldly, and said, You are just a little stronger in physique. It's fine even if I cannot kill you for the time being. I can capture you and bring you back to be slowly refined. 1 year, 10 years, I will definitely be able to refine you. What I lack the least is patience and time. Can you capture me? Ling Han stretched out a finger and pointed. The Beast Snake King was instantly displeased. What kind of existence was he? When had he ever been pointed at by someone before? He immediately wanted to make a move, but he had just raised his hand when he suddenly paused, and said, Honored one, please show yourself. What if I don't want to see you? Yi Shuang's lazy voice was heard. Then it's best if you don't interfere, Honored one. This is the will of the 5 great sects. The Beast Snake King humphed. Little earthworms, I don't know how many I have trampled to death in the past, and you actually dare to be insolent in front of me. Yi Shuang said proudly. She still did not show herself. For the sake of that large earthworm, I don't want to become enemies with him. Get lost, lest you say that I bullied a junior in the future. Honored one, aren't you a bit too arrogant? The Beast Snake King said with a sneer. He was the strongest elite in the world, with battle prowess as high as 12 stars of Shattering Void tier. Those that could rival him in this world could really be counted on one's fingers. Not to mention those freaks from the Purple Moon Empire, each of them had grasped 4 or 5 mystical powers, and could even use power of the nation, and their battle prowess had even surpassed 15 stars. Are you going to get lost or not? Yi Shuang directly rebuked. The Beast Snake King took a deep breath. Obviously, she was a Shattering Void tier elite. There was no doubt about this, but how many stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess did she have? At this moment, he was having a hard time fighting against the Purple Moon Empire, and if there was another Shattering Void tier enemy, that would be an additional burden. It was best not to add any more enemies for himself, unless he had the confidence to kill her here. However, they were both in the Shattering Void tier, and if one side wanted to escape, there was still a considerable amount of certainty. At worst, they would just burn their life force, and the speed that they would explode with would be something that even the immortals in the lower realm could not possibly catch up to. Alright, I will only bring this junior with me, he said, pointing at Ling Han. No! Yi Shuang flatly refused. Your Honor, you are too domineering, the Beast Snake King said coldly. Did she really think he was afraid? Yi Shuang laughed loudly, and said, I have always been domineering. Are you displeasing to the eye? If you have the ability, then come and fight me. How will I deal with you? The Beast Snake King trembled in anger. This woman was too much of a ruffian. He no longer paid attention to her, and instead stretched out a hand to grab Ling Han. Since he could not slap this freak to death, then he would capture him and bring him back to be suppressed. Such a physique could completely be used as a human pill, and after being refined, it would definitely be a great tonic. Impudence. A slender hand shot out, endlessly enlarging, and blocked the large hand that the Beast Snake King had stretched out. Pang, the two collided, and instantly formed a visible wave in the skies, which suddenly swept downwards. Wang, 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 a hemispherical light barrier immediately appeared on the imperial capital below. Under this wave, it trembled as if it was about to be destroyed. Pa, 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 a few places split open, and the shock wave instantly caused great destruction. Fortunately, because of the existence of this light barrier, the imperial capital only suffered the impact. Otherwise, it would have been razed to the ground. The shattering void tier was too strong. In the skies, a light barrier also appeared on that battleship. The hull of the battleship swayed as if it was in water, and was affected by the waves. Shuang Shuang, don't fight with him here. My imperial capital is about to be destroyed. Ling Han called out. That defensive light barrier just now was actually formed by the silhouette of the black tower above the imperial capital. This was the marvelous use of power of the nation. If he could unify the whole north region, the defense that was formed, probably even the Beast Snake King wouldn't be able to break through. Shuang Shuang's figure flashed, and she was already stepping into the skies. She waved her long hair in great dissatisfaction and said, "Brat, you've grown more daring, actually daring to order me around. Grandaunt, please suppress this old snake." That should be fine, right? Ling Han said with a smile. Although it's not too sincere, I have such a helpful personality. It can't be helped, so I'll help you this once. Shuang Shuang turned to the Beast Snake King, and revealed a bright smile. Little earthworm, if you don't leave now, there really won't be another chance. Who are you? The Beast Snake King looked at Shuang Shuang solemnly. He actually couldn't tell the depth of her cultivation, which meant that her tier was not beneath his. It was definitely impossible to surpass him. In this world, at most, one could only be in the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, unless it was an immortal that descended to the mortal realm. Chapter 6:16. There was a first and a second time for everything, but how could there be a third time? Hu Qingfang already escaped twice, and actually wanted to run a third time, inviting another deity transformation tier elite over. Ling Han obviously couldn't bear it, and blocked the carriage with his sword, imposing and imposing. Handsome. Qin Lianyu said infatuatedly. She was actually a romantic person, obviously worshipping heroes the most. Ling Han was similar in age to her, and the difference in tier wasn't great, but his strength was much, much stronger, instantly conquering her heart. Of course, she only worshipped Ling Han now, which was different from falling in love with him. The ugly freak is planning on Ling Han as expected. Should I kill her? Hunyo stroked her chin, seriously considering this idea. Ling Han condensed sword chi, forming a fake ray, and 10,000 techniques returned to one was ready to be unleashed after accumulating power. Brat, you're indeed very strong, but this young master is the Wind Moon sect's young sect master. Are you sure you want to be enemies with me? Hu Qingfang threatened. Being forced to use his background to scare people, it could be seen that he was indeed at his wit's end. Ling Han sneered, and said, Wind Moon sect, such a shameless sect, I might as well uproot it to prevent it from wreaking havoc. Such big words! Hu Qingfang shouted fiercely. Although Ling Han's battle prowess was strong, he was only at the level of the spiritual infant tier, while the Wind Moon sect had heaven tier warriors overseeing it, and more than one. Deity transformation tier warriors could crush spiritual infant tier warriors, let alone heaven tier ones. I'll kill you first as a sacrifice to the flag. Ling Han had already finished accumulating power, and with a swing of his sword, 29 flashes of sword chi condensed together, turning into a faint golden stripe that swept towards the carriage. The carriage already activated its shield, blocking the stripe, but this was only a matter of an instant. Peng, the shield actually shattered under the bombardment of sword chi, and the stripe continued to sweep past, passing through the middle of the carriage. The entire carriage was instantly split into two, forcibly sliced into two. Terrifying. When the carriage's defenses were activated, it could form a spiritual infant tier level shield, and it relied on origin crystals as a source of power. As long as the origin crystals were still present, the shield could be maintained, and could be instantly replenished. However, it was still destroyed by a single sword strike. Then, how terrifying was the instantaneous explosive power of Ling Han's sword strike, for it to be unable to replenish the shield in time. In the carriage, Hu Qingfang leapt out, his face pale. This guy was really too ferocious. He was sitting in the Wind Moon sect's ancient chariot, which theoretically couldn't be broken by any spiritual infant-tier warrior. In the Central Plains, those in the divine transformation realm could be called experts, and those who had reached this level would not easily start a war with the Wind Moon sect. Therefore, Hu Qingfang had always been arrogant with the ancient chariot. Until recently, he had kicked 2 iron plates in succession. Hunyo could bite through the chariot's defenses, and Ling Han was even more awesome, slicing the chariot in 2 with a single slash. You don't come over. Hu Qingfang lost his greatest trump card, and finally panicked, completely losing his composure. Then scream until your throat breaks, and see if anyone will come to save you, Ling Han said indifferently. Ha ha ha. Hunyo gave face and laughed, while Zhu Xian covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Qin Lianyu thought for a moment and also laughed. When an idol told a joke, no matter if it was funny or not, she'd laugh first. Attack! Hu Qingfang's words pushed the 4 beautiful women forward, while he himself turned around and ran. Truly unworthy of being a man. Ling Han's figure flashed, turning into a bolt of lightning and catching up to Hu Qingfang. With a slash, Pu, the opponent's head flew into the sky, blood spurting wildly from the severed neck. Young sect master! The 4 beautiful women exclaimed, their faces pale. Jackals of the same tribe. Ling Han turned around and swung his sword again, beheading these 4 beautiful women as well. For Wind Moon sect's people, men harvested primordial yin, and women harvested primordial yang. The higher the tier, the more people they harmed, and none of them had to be tolerated. Ah, you really did it. Qin Lianyu looked at Hu Qingfang's corpse and sighed. Although Wind Moon sect's sect master has countless wives and concubines, he only has this one son, and is extremely doted on. You killing him is forming a mortal enmity with Wind Moon sect. Ling Han walked towards her, and said, then should I silence you? No need, no need. Qin Lianyu hurriedly waved her hand. Isn't there still Yang Yun, this fish that escaped the net, no need to silence me. This woman had quite the spirit of self-entertainment. Ling Han shook his head, and walked over to collect the spatial rings that Hu Qingfang and Duan Mingde dropped. Firstly, these 2 were truly quite wealthy, especially Hu Qingfang, who actually had a piece of 7th-tier rare metal in his spatial ring. Presumably, it was to be forged into a weapon for him after he advanced into the spiritual infant tier. Perfect, I only have 6 arrows left. Although this piece of rare metal isn't big, forging 5 arrows shouldn't be a problem. Ling Han walked back and said, where are you 2 going? These 2 obviously referred to Qin Lianyu and He Lanyan. You guys are going to the Restore Heaven Academy, and I'm also going there, so of course we're going together. Qin Lianyu immediately said. He Lanyan glanced at Kenyi and said, I'll also go with you guys. Kenyi blushed slightly, but a hint of gentleness flashed past his eyes. The calamity just now instead opened the membrane separating the 2 of them, playing a positive role. Ling Han laughed loudly, and casually took out a large handful of medicinal pills from the Black Tower, handing them over to He Lanyan, and said, come, this is a greeting gift. He Lanyan instantly blushed in embarrassment, but still extended her hand and took back these medicinal pills. She then secretly kissed Kenyi for another night. Her heart was sweet, and she felt that all the humiliation she suffered before had turned into smoke. Qin Lianyu also extended her slender hand, and said, this woman was so thick-skinned. Ling Han sneered, and said, no, stingy. Qin Lianyu muttered. Ling Han ignored her, and said, let's go. Don't really attract the Wind Moon sect's ultimate expert, then we'll have to bear the consequences. Everyone nodded. This was a forest anyways, and wild beasts ran amok, so they could obviously destroy the corpses and erase the evidence for them. Without Hu Qingfang's threat, they walked back to the main road. After all, the terrain in the forest was complicated, affecting speed. Brother Ling, are you interested in going to a place? Qin Lianyu approached to strike up a conversation. No. Ling Han directly refused. You still haven't heard me say what place it is. Qin Lianyu was a bit resentful, doubting her own charm for the first time. How could Ling Han refuse so straightforwardly? I'm not interested in any place, Ling Han said. That's a medicinal valley. Qin Lianyu said. Ling Han was slightly startled. For him, the Alchemy Emperor, a medicinal valley was still quite attractive. In his hands, he could maximize the effects of medicinal ingredients. His current tier was getting higher and higher, and he needed more and more high-level medicinal ingredients. He asked, what level of medicinal valley? Chapter 617. If it was only a flower blossom tier or spiritual pedestal tier medicinal valley, Ling Han wouldn't be interested. He'd soon cross the flower blossom tier and advance into the spiritual infant tier. I'm not sure about the specifics. There's a spiritual infant tier beast keeping watch at the valley entrance, so I don't dare to go deep, but I also found a spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, Qin Lianyu said. It's also because of this medicinal valley that I ran into Hu Qingfang. I see. Ling Han murmured. There was a 7th-tier spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, so there might be even higher-level spirit medicines in the valley. Even if they were only 7th-tier spirit medicines, they were still quite useful. Brother Ling, are you moved? Qin Lianyu said with a smile. Are you showing off? Ling Han said. Follow me. Qin Lianyu didn't take the chance to push him, but instead led the way in front while talking about how she discovered the medicinal valley. Because there was still half a year before the Restore Heaven Academy officially opened, she wasn't in a hurry and wandered around along the way, still wanting to find her own chance. And she was really lucky. When she was tracking a big white rabbit, she came to that medicinal valley. However, there were spiritual infant tier beasts roaming about, frightening her. She was just about to find someone to join forces and barge in, but unexpectedly encountered Hu Qingfang. She was then chased by the latter, and tangled with him for more than half a month. So, they were still quite far from that medicinal valley. When Qin Lianyu ran, she obviously took many detours, but they didn't have to go to the medicinal valley. They only needed to walk in a straight line, so it was about a 5-day journey. A day later, they came to a small town and stopped to rest for the night. Lady Qin. Lady Qin. Early the next morning, they were about to set off when they saw a young man chasing after them. He looked to be about 26 or 27, and was actually already at the peak stage of the flower blossom tier, quite impressive in strength. His looks were also quite impressive. A cyan outfit completely outlined his slender and fit figure, his hair was jet black as if it could glow, and his skin was sparkling, smoother than many women's. Yi Rong. Qin Lianyu revealed a surprised expression and said, "Why did you come?" "I heard that Miss Qin was entangled by that evil thief, Hu Qingfang, so I immediately rushed over. Fortunately, I came in time." The azure-clothed man heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. There was an obvious adoration in his eyes. Qin Lianyu pretended not to see and said, "This is the Flying Star sect master's beloved disciple, Yi Rong, Brother Yi. Brother Ye's talent in martial art is extremely high, and he obtained the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy." Yi Rong immediately revealed an arrogant expression. He placed his hands behind his back, appearing extremely arrogant. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, it showed that his talent was indeed extremely awesome. Such a genius was obviously proud of his talent. He was polite to Qin Lianyu because he liked this woman, and in front of others, he naturally revealed the arrogance that geniuses normally had. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. A genius like him naturally disdained to be associated with Ling Han and the others. Ling Han only smiled, and said, "So it's Brother Yi." Seeing Ling Han greet him, Can Yi, Zhu Xian Air, and He Lanyan also greeted him one after another. Hun Yo, however, didn't bother to pay attention to such a cocky guy. Yi Rong took everyone's greetings as a matter of course. To be able to obtain direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy, this already sufficiently affirmed his talent, and was the capital for his pride. He was completely condescending, and only looked at Qin Lianyu, and said, "Miss Qin, let me escort you to the Restore Heaven Academy." Qin Lianyu was displeased, and said, "Brother Yi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Hee, I'm just concerned about you." Yi Rong didn't take offense. However, if these words were said by someone else, he'd definitely fly into a rage, and it was even possible that he'd directly kill the other party. How could a peerless genius be insulted lightly? Qin Lianyu looked at Ling Han with an inquiring gaze, because they were going to the Medicinal Valley next. If there was one more person, then there would obviously be one more person to distribute the treasured medicine after obtaining it. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since Brother Yi is so sincere, then let's go together." Yi Rong couldn't help but glance at Ling Han, and felt that this person was a bit perceptive, knowing that he was pursuing Qin Lianyu, and deliberately spoke for him. And there was no harm in guiding him in the future. He opened his mouth very arrogantly, and said, "You guys are all going to the Restore Heaven Academy, right?" After obtaining everyone's affirmation, he laughed mischievously, and said, "I'm a direct disciple, after all, and have certain privileges. In the future, when you guys go to the academy to participate in the exam, I'll put in a few good words for you guys and help you guys." Then many thanks, Ling Han said indifferently. He'd seen many people who thought themselves infallible like this, and didn't take it to heart at all. Zhu Xian'er, Qin Lianyu, and the other 2 girls covered their mouths and laughed lightly. If this guy witnessed Ling Han's battle prowess, he probably wouldn't say anything about helping even if he was beaten to death. Blushing, including Yi Rong, the 7 of them continued forward. Yi Rong certainly had quite a background. Flying Star Sect was a super sect that wasn't inferior to Wind Moon Sect, but couldn't compare to ancient orthodoxies like Absolute Saber Sect and Heaven's Sword Sect. This Yi Rong was the 7th disciple of Flying Star Sect's sect master, and also one of the most outstanding 3. Being able to obtain the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy was proof. He was currently only 29 years old, and looked 26 or 27 because he entered the Flower Blossom tier early, and his appearance changed slowly. Peak stage of the Flower Blossom tier, battle prowess of 16 stars, extremely outstanding. Along the way, only he had the right to talk, boasting about his battle achievements, what kind of elites and geniuses he'd once beheaded, insufferably arrogant. However, everyone paid no attention to him, making him often unable to continue the conversation as he spoke, appearing extremely awkward. For days later, at night, they passed by a village. Because it wasn't far from the Medicinal Valley, they wanted to rush there in one go, not thinking of stopping here. However, Ling Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Zhu Xian'er asked. Yi Rong was extremely displeased. If it weren't for Qin Lianyu's sake, he wouldn't drag these people along at all, but now, Ling Han actually dared to drag them down. "It's only just entered night, why isn't there a bit of fire in this village?" Ling Han asked. "Maybe they sleep early," Yi Rong said casually, appearing very displeased. A mere mortal village, even if something happened, how would it be worth paying attention? The typical mentality of a superior. Ling Han ignored him and turned back towards the village. Yi Rong trembled in anger. He actually dared to ignore him, truly despicable, he said, "Ignore him, we." Before the word "go" left his mouth, he saw the others already follow Ling Han, almost making him faint from anger. Were these people possessed? Chapter 618. Ling Han entered the village. This was like a graveyard, deathly silent, and no movement could be heard. "Too quiet," Qin Lianyu said, continuously looking at the place where moonlight couldn't reach, as if a monster would suddenly jump out from the dark and ghastly place. "No breathing, no heartbeat," Zhu Xian'er said solemnly. For experts like them, they could hear the sound of heartbeat and breathing from a distance of 300 meters, and separated by a few walls. This wasn't a problem at all. But now, there were none of these sounds, not even the barking of domestic dogs and the crying of chickens and ducks. It was as if this village had been abandoned for countless years, but one could still clearly see corn cobs and red peppers hanging under the eaves of some houses, representing that this village still had people living not long ago, or even yesterday. Strange. Everyone discovered something was off, and said one after another. Yi Rong also walked over, and couldn't help but sneer, and said, "Just a mortal village, what's there to make a fuss about?" No one paid attention to him, and on the contrary, everyone's curiosity was piqued. Ling Han pushed open a door and walked in. The furniture in the house was all there, and there were even a few dishes on the table, but they were obviously cold now, but with a sniff, they hadn't gone bad yet. Something suddenly happened that caused the entire village's people to die, as well as domestic animals. After searching the house, Ling Han came to another house, but it was much more chaotic here. There were obvious signs of fighting, and there was fresh blood on the ground and walls, a ghastly sight. A conflict occurred, but the scale wasn't large. It should only be a dispute among mortals, Qin Lianyu speculated. But what exactly happened to actually affect the entire village and even the livestock? This was puzzling. Even if two people fought, it couldn't possibly affect the entire village, not to mention that even the chickens and dogs suffered. Ling Han walked into the inner room, and suddenly, his steps paused. Hong, a black shadow suddenly scuttled out, pouncing towards Ling Han. Its arms spread open, looking like it was going to hug him, but its mouth was wide open, revealing ghastly white teeth as it pointed straight at Ling Han's throat. "Humph, a mere mortal dares to launch a sneak attack?" Yi Rong said disdainfully. He flicked a finger with his right hand, and that figure instantly fell backwards, a bit of blood appearing on his forehead. Ling Han was astonished. With a wave of his right hand, his origin energy transformed into flames that lit up the surrounding space. He could see that it was indeed a villager. There was a bloody hole in his forehead, but there was no blood splattering everywhere. It was just a bloody hole with a little bit of black blood flowing out. "What's so good about it?" Yi Rong said unhappily. They were about to reach the medicinal valley, so why were they wasting time here? "This is a corpse soldier." Ling Han frowned. This person had been dead for a long time, so his blood had congealed. If a corpse soldier was not tempered, then it would only be left with the most primitive instincts. They slaughtered and devoured the flesh and blood of living creatures. It was clear that all the poultry in the village had been eaten by the villagers who had turned into corpse soldiers. Most of them had probably entered the forest to continue searching for blood and flesh. However, this one was lying in ambush in the house. It was a corpse when it was not alarmed, but after smelling the scent of living things, it moved. The mystery was solved, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The unknown was the most terrifying, and now that they knew what they were about to face, they were instead relieved. Strange, why are there corpse soldiers here? Could it be the Thousand Corpse Sect's doing? Ling Han mumbled. Previously, the Thousand Corpse Sect was quite high profile, besieging Million Treasures City with the fourth killing formation. If it weren't for Feng Peyun's appearance, Million Treasures City would probably have fallen into the hands of the Thousand Corpse Sect. He had a feeling that the Thousand Corpse Sect, which had always been low-key, might rise completely in this era. It was at once the best of times and the worst of times. It's just a low-level corpse soldier. Yi Rong actually recognized the corpse soldier, so he wasn't just arrogant. Ling Han searched the entire village again. There were a total of 5 corpse soldiers here, and what shocked him was that 2 corpse soldiers were obviously much stronger, probably devouring the other corpse soldiers and obtaining an upgrade. At the Fallen Moon Gorge, Ling Han stopped a plot of the Thousand Corpse Sect. They wanted to use medicinal pills to turn all the people in the desolate north into corpse soldiers, devouring each other and raising a corpse king. Could it be that the Thousand Corpse Sect was now daring enough to act so recklessly in the Middle State? In terms of population, the Middle State was enough to raise many corpse kings, But the problem was that the middle state still had super forces like the Absolute Saber sect and the Heaven Sword sect, so could they let the Thousand Corpse sect act so recklessly? This world was destined to not be peaceful. Ling Han and the others continued on their way, and when they passed by a few small villages, they discovered that the people there were all turned into corpse soldiers. Such a situation not only shocked Ling Han, but even Qin Lianyu and Yi Rong became solemn. What did the Thousand Corpse sect mean by this? They didn't find the people of the Thousand Corpse sect, because they were already deep into the mountain forest. Under Qin Lianyu's guidance, they soon arrived at a valley that was extremely remote. The entrance was blocked by a towering tree, and if one didn't deliberately climb up, it was absolutely impossible to discover it. After the entrance, there was a long valley path that was very tight and narrow, but after walking forward for a few dozen meters, the path began to widen, becoming wider and wider. Above their heads, there were layers of protruding rocks blocking them. Even if one flew from the air, they would only think that this was a solid mountainous region, so how could they know that there was actually another world below? Light fell through a wondrous refraction, and although it wasn't very bright, it was enough for people to see. After walking for a while, the appearance of the valley finally appeared ahead. As expected, there was a 7th-tier spirit fruit at the entrance of the valley. It was a peach tree that bore bright red fruits, each as big as the mouth of a bowl, and an alluring fragrance could be smelled from far away. Everyone couldn't help but be tempted, wishing to immediately pluck one to taste, and Hunyou's saliva was about to drip down. However, no one dared to move rashly, because there was a crimson mountain leopard at the entrance of the valley, with a total of 9 fist-sized vein-like patterns on its back. Gray-patterned leopard, a spiritual infant tier beast, the number of vein-like patterns on its back represented its tier. 9th-layer spiritual infant tier beasts were usually much stronger than normal 9th-layer spiritual infant tier martial artists, because beasts had thick skin and flesh, and their claws and sharp teeth were equivalent to rare metals of the same tier. Whether in terms of lethality or defense, they surpassed martial artists of the same tier. How could it be 9th-layer spiritual infant tier? Yi Rong said with a frown. Although he admitted that his strength was hard to find an opponent in the same tier, encountering a spiritual infant tier would only be a piece of cake, not to mention this was a 9th-layer spiritual infant tier beast. Although the spirit fruit was right in front of him, that was all he could do. Ling Han, however, was overjoyed. If he stored this peach tree into the Black Tower, then he'd have an endless supply of 7th-tier spirit peaches to eat. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 619. Ling Han waited at the door. So many years had passed anyway, so he didn't mind waiting a little longer. Hunyou, meanwhile, kicked a rock out of boredom. Paw, paw, paw. She seemed to be a bit addicted to it, kicking harder and harder with each kick. Finally, she'd gotten into trouble. Aya, who is it, actually daring to ambush this young master? A youngster walked over while holding his forehead, grimacing in pain. His features were all twisted in pain. When Hunyou saw him, she instantly stuck out her tongue and hid behind Ling Han. Then, she stretched out a small finger and pointed at Zhu Xian'er, saying, "It's this woman who threw a rock at you." Hunyou saw it clearly. Who would suspect a child? That youngster followed Hunyou's finger to Zhu Xian'er. He was just about to fly into a rage, but immediately revealed a stunned expression. This woman was really too beautiful, wasn't she? Her beauty was practically unparalleled in absolute Cold City. All of a sudden, it seemed as if his forehead didn't hurt anymore. He hurriedly put on what he thought was his most elegant smile, and said, "I am Feng Yishou, may I know Mrs. name?" Zhu Xian'er only glanced at him indifferently, and said, "We've met by chance, and are only passers-by. There's no need to tell me your name. You have character, I like it." Feng Yishou turned his face away and said to himself. Then, he turned back, and his smile became even more brilliant. To be able to meet in the vast sea of people, isn't this a kind of fate? "Miss, your beauty is too dazzling, my eyes can only feel your existence." Zhu Xian'er directly ignored him, lest he took advantage of the situation and pestered her endlessly. Miss, your beauty is poison, but I will gladly endure it. I've been conquered by you, please allow me to use the rest of my life to love you dearly. Feng Yishou blurted out words of love one after another. He was definitely a veteran in the brothel, and did not repeat even half a sentence. With his handsome appearance and his sweet mouth, it was believed that there would be countless women who would willingly jump into his gentle trap. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest effect on Zhu Xian'er, and instead caused her expression to become colder and colder. Idiot, why do you have so much nonsense to say? Just knock her out and carry her home. Hunyo really could not go on anymore, and jumped out to give advice. That's not too good, right? Feng Yishou scratched his head as he grinned foolishly. Trust Nyo. Hunyo said encouragingly. Feng Yishou clapped his hands, and said, let's do it. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, what do you want to do? Feng Yishou instantly shuddered, and said, I have no interest in men, so don't play dirty jokes with me. Fuck, was this guy a clown? Ling Han laughed coldly, and said, since you've said so, then I have no choice but to play with you. Don't you dare act recklessly, I am not that kind of person. Furthermore, I am very powerful, so don't seek trouble for yourself. Feng Yishou hurriedly drew his sword, and put on a vigilant expression that said, you're a pervert, don't come near me. Ling Han moved, and grabbed out at the other, very casually. Damn pervert, move. Feng Yishou drew his sword, and a sword ray slashed out, slicing towards Ling Han's wrist. Although this person was inexplicably unreliable, he really did have some skill. There were not many people who could condense sword ray at this age. However, compared to Ling Han, the two of them were completely not on the same level. Ling Han's hand twisted, and had already grabbed the other's wrist. He smiled, and said, guess, will I steam you or braise you? Mother! Feng Yishou's whole body was covered with goosebumps, and he hurriedly exerted his strength to struggle free, but Ling Han's hand was like an iron hoop, so he could not move at all, and could only stare at him helplessly. Don't call me mother, call me big brother, and I will let you go, Ling Han said, smiling. You think you are worthy of this young master calling you big brother? Feng Yishou humphed, and with a shake of his left hand, there actually appeared another sword, which he pierced towards Ling Han. Ling Han released his hand, and then grabbed out at Feng Yishou's left hand. Pa, he caught it head-on. Feng Yishou paled in shock. How could this person's attack be so fast? He roared in fury, and his right hand slashed out again. This time, he used his full power. Even his hair stood on end like needles, and his sword intent turned solid, charging towards Ling Han ruthlessly. The latter's physique was extremely strong, so his spirit would definitely not be stable enough. If he was hit by his attack, he would definitely hold his head and groan. How could there be such a monster in this world who had cultivated both his physique and spirit to the pinnacle? Ling Han smiled faintly, and with a move of his sword heart, Feng Yishou's sword intent instantly shattered, and as if he had suffered a heavy blow, Feng Yishou's face instantly turned pale, and even his expression was distorted, appearing to be in incredible pain. He released his hand, and Feng Yishou curled up on the ground, his whole body spasming. This attack on his spirit was not light. However, for him, this was no less than a kind of tempering. If he could endure it, the toughness of his spirit would definitely be able to advance another step further. Young Master Feng. At this moment, two people walked out from the door. One was the guard who had gone in to make the report previously, and the other was a slender old man. He looked to be in his 60s or 70s, and had quite a bearing, but at this moment, his face was filled with agitation. With a quick stride, he rushed in front of Feng Yishou and helped him up. After a careful inspection, he only calmed down slightly when he discovered that there were no injuries on the latter's body. The old man turned to Ling Han, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes as he said, "Was it you who injured young Master Feng?" Ling Han smiled, and said, "The term injured is too inaccurate. It should be said that we sparred, and he was no match for me. Coming to our Cold Spear Association, and still daring to injure someone, how dare you?" the old man said coldly. He stretched out his right hand, and it instantly turned green, exuding the texture of metal. Multiple patterns flickered on it. This old man's cultivation level was in the deity transformation tier, so his abilities were really not low. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Your status is not low either. Then let me ask you, do you have any impression of the names Jiang Yufeng, Yin Yongwang, Kong Xiu Yuan? It's useless even if you bring out a powerful backer. Today, no one will be able to save you." The old man leaped out and struck out in Ling Han's direction. The palm had not yet arrived, but a strong gust of wind had already arrived. Origin power was oppressive, and its destructive power was extremely shocking. Ling Han pressed out with his right hand, and the old man was instantly sent flying. Peng, 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 peng. At least a dozen or so walls had been forcibly broken by him, and only then did he stop. He directly fainted. This time, he should really be taken seriously, right? Tang, tang, tang. A great many people rushed out from the manor and surrounded Ling Han, but none of them made a move. Hein. A frightening aura circulated, and a figure also walked out. "Greetings, seventh elder." Everyone half knelt in greeting. That was an old man with a head full of white hair, but his spirit was hale and hearty, and his eyes were shining brightly. He stared at Ling Han and said, "Young man, you are quite bold, actually daring to come to the Cold Spear Association and behave atrociously." Behave atrociously? Ling Han shook his head. It was only self-defense. However, there is a limit to my patience. If no one is willing to have a proper talk with me, then I can only first knock you all over, and let you all calm down. Chapter 620. Ling Han and the others all cried out miserably. They were so innocent, and were actually implicated by a large white rabbit. Go, go, go! They hurriedly broke into a run. This wasn't something they could fight against at all. Any random beast could take care of them. They didn't care about exposing their tracks, flying in the sky and running very fast. "I'm going to faint, that damned rabbit actually followed us here." Ling Han turned around, and saw that the large white rabbit had actually followed them after they arrived. This damn rabbit's speed was really too fast. With a step, it was several dozen meters, actually rapidly closing the distance between them. This damn rabbit, everyone gritted their teeth. It was fine if you tricked them, but you actually still wanted to continue harming them. What kind of grudge was this? This rabbit seems to be the one that led me into the valley, Qin Lianyu suddenly said. Fuck, this rabbit is also a habitual thief. Screwed us over. However, we certainly stole something, so it's not considered unjust. Ling Han grabbed everyone with origin power and used the demon fairy step, suddenly speeding up. Gidea, Gidea. Hunyo mischievously rode on Ling Han's shoulder and cried out excitedly. In her dictionary, there was never the word fear. Piu, that large white rabbit's legs actually stepped on the air and also soared into the sky. As its legs stepped on the air, its speed was also shockingly fast, actually not inferior to Ling Han, who used the demon fairy step and used the thunderclap ninth heaven mystical power. It was no wonder, if it didn't have such speed, how would it dare enter the medicinal valley and steal under the noses of so many deity transformation tier beasts? Damn rabbit, you got yourself into big trouble. Qin Lianyu couldn't help but shout. Back then, it was this rabbit that led her here and discovered this medicinal valley, but now, because of this damn rabbit, they were chased by deity transformation tier beasts. Rabbit, so fat. Hunyo turned her head, instantly drooling. Nyo wants to eat rabbit meat. Pa, you want to eat Uncle Rabbit's meat, you're still 108,000 years too early. This large white rabbit grabbed the carrot in its mouth with its little claws and immediately retorted sarcastically at Hunyo. Puff, everyone instantly stuck out their tongues. This damned rabbit actually knew how to speak. After a beast advanced into the flower blossom tier, its intelligence would develop, and it indeed possessed intelligence not inferior to that of a human's. However, opening its mouth to speak human language, this was too fantastical. What? Are you all scared when you see that Lord Rabbit can speak? Haha, Lord Rabbit is mighty as expected. The large white rabbit said proudly. Damned rabbit, you did it on purpose, didn't you? Ling Han said. You didn't run anywhere else, but you led the pursuers here. Hee hee, it's fun to run together. White Rabbit did not deny it at all. Damned rabbit, just you wait. Qin Lian Yu was even more furious, wailing loudly. If she wasn't grabbed by Ling Han's origin power hand, she would have definitely gone to fight this lowly rabbit. Rabbit meat seems to be very delicious. Hunyo's eyes lit up as she stared at the large white rabbit. Come, Uncle Rabbit is right here. Bring it on. Whoever's afraid is a coward. The large white rabbit was very mischievous, and it even wagged its tiny tail, looking very despicable to the bone. Nyo's rabbit meat. Hunyo was excited and suddenly charged over. Her speed was even faster, and with a flash of lightning, she rode on the large white rabbit's back. This large white rabbit was half a person's height, and Hunyo's height was also half a person's height. The human and rabbit were about the same in terms of physique. One was completely snow white, with only 2 eyes that were like rubies, and the other was pink like carved jade, extremely cute. Just by appearance, they were all deceitful, but in reality, Hunyo opened her mouth and bit at the large white rabbit. With a single bite, she bit down on the large white rabbit's tail. It was so painful that the despicable rabbit's whole body instantly trembled, and its speed unbelievably doubled. With a xiao, it shot out and quickly overtook Ling Han. Ah, it screamed. Are you born in the year of the dog? It hurts so much, your Lord Rabbit. Hunyo was also very gloomy. Her teeth could be said to be successful in every endeavor, but she actually couldn't bite off this lowly rabbit's tail in one bite. It was truly inconceivable. Her ferocity flared up, and she bit onto the rabbit's tail without letting go while continuously shaking her head, wanting to forcibly pull off the rabbit's tail. The large white rabbit screamed continuously and ran even faster. Ling Han hurriedly sped up, but could only watch the human and rabbit disappear before his eyes. After all, he still hadn't cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to great accomplishment, and he still had a group of people with him. Fortunately, the pursuers behind also fell further and further behind, and soon disappeared. Ling Han walked forward for a while, and saw that the large white rabbit no longer ran, but tried hard to shake off Hunyo. However, Hunyo bit onto the rabbit's tail, and no matter how this lowly rabbit shook, it was useless, and refused to let go. Let go, let go. The large white rabbit jumped anxiously. Lord Rabbit's tail is short in the first place, and if it's bitten off by you, how would Lord Rabbit have the face to see others in the future? Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, Lowly rabbit, give me the dragon blood tyrant ginseng in your hand, and I'll help you. The large white rabbit was startled, and stopped its movements. It walked towards Ling Han, and said, You actually recognize this spirit ginseng? It immediately screamed again, and Hunyo began to grind her teeth again. Human, hurry and make this little girl let go, your Lord Rabbit is going to die. The large white rabbit continued to scream. Ginseng. Ling Han extended his hand. A pained expression appeared on the large white rabbit's face. It had expended a great deal of effort to steal this from the medicinal valley, and it had only licked it a few times. Now, it had to hand it over. However, its tail was in pain from being bitten, and this strange little girl gave it an indescribable sense of fear. It didn't dare to unleash a powerful attack, or else it would bring about an unimaginable disaster. It could only raise its 2 small front paws and throw the ginseng to Ling Han. Ling Han caught it and looked carefully. He saw that the roots of this ginseng were still there, and it was still full of life force. He laughed loudly, and put the ginseng into the black tower. Great, 1 year later, he could eat large amounts of treasured ginseng. This was the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. According to legend, it was a 1,000-year-old ginseng that bathed in the blood of a true dragon and produced a mutation. One had to know how domineering the blood of a true dragon was. This ginseng could bathe in dragon's blood and not die, and instead absorb the essence of the dragon's blood, so the medicinal effects were naturally shocking. However, this definitely couldn't be the first-generation dragon blood tyrant ginseng. Its effects obviously couldn't compare to the first generation, but it was still a treasure among 9th-tier treasured medicines, tempting even heaven-tier warriors. Planted, it only needed a year to be harvested like a radish. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Hunyo, let go. This lowly rabbit isn't cooked, it's not tasty." Hunyo finally let go, and after some thought, said, "This rabbit is delicious, delicious even if it's not cooked." She stared at the large white rabbit again, saliva dripping out. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 621. The large white rabbit was so scared that all of its fur stood on end, and its 2 legs couldn't help but tremble. It wanted to run away, but when it thought about it, it didn't want to. The dragon blood tyrant ginseng had been taken away by this human youth. It had put in a lot of effort and searched countless times before it managed to steal the ginseng. "Human, why don't we all eat ginseng soup? Uncle Rabbit will catch a blue phoenix and make a black chicken ginseng soup. It's definitely nutritious." The rabbit immediately said to Hunyo, drooling all over the ground. "Make rabbit ginseng soup." Hunyo immediately raised her hand. "Fuck you." The large white rabbit almost kicked Hunyo, but its heart palpitated, not daring to act recklessly. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "That ginseng can't be eaten for now. It has to wait for another year. I promise you, you give me one now, and I'll return you 2 a year later. How about it?" The large white rabbit couldn't help but widen its red eyes, and said, "Human brat, you're bragging too much. You think your Uncle Rabbit was coaxed to believe such a lie? Uncle Rabbit eats more spirit medicine than you eat rice." Ruffian Rabbit Ling Han stuck his middle finger at it. "Anyway, that's what I said. Believe it or not, who asked the treasure ginseng to be on him?" "Believe, of course Uncle Rabbit believes." The large white rabbit hurriedly nodded. "Ah!" It suddenly screamed again. "This girl bit Uncle Rabbit again." "Hunyo," Ling Han said. Hunyo reluctantly withdrew her mouth from the large white rabbit's leg, and said, "This rabbit is delicious, Nyo wants to eat rabbit meat." She cried out, acting coquettishly. "Hunyo won't make a fuss." Ling Han picked Hunyo up, and couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Hunyo was delicious, but never so gluttonous. He took out some dried meat and handed it to Hunyo, letting her eat first. Hunyo gnawed unhappily, her eyes still fixed on the large white rabbit, causing the rabbit to clamp its tail between its legs. However, the rabbit's tail was too short, and it was very difficult to clamp it. "Since the pursuers have retreated, let's eat something first to calm down," Ling Han said, taking out the pot and putting in the ingredients from the Black Tower. He even deliberately pulled out a few 1,000-year-old ginsengs. However, even in the Black Tower, the ginseng could only grow to 1,000 years old, and couldn't advance any further. That was because these ginseng seeds were only ordinary items, and 1,000 years was the limit. Therefore, Ling Han didn't mind sharing it with everyone. Otherwise, it would just rot in the mud. 1,000-year purple ginseng. 1,000-year jade ginseng. 1,000-year yellow ginseng. Qin Lianyu looked at them one by one, her beautiful eyes involuntarily radiating with astonishment. In terms of species, these ginsengs were only at the level of level 4 or 5 spirit medicine, but they were old enough. 1,000 years was enough to raise their value by another level. Most importantly, Ling Han had actually taken them out to make soup. How extravagant was that? He'd seen tycoons, but to be this rich, there probably wasn't a second one in the world. Even shattering void tier elites couldn't do it. After all, how many 1,000-year-old spirit ginseng were there in the world, and there was an upper limit. But when he looked at Zhu Xian'er and Ken Yi, they didn't seem surprised at all, as if this was a common occurrence. Could it be that they often ate this kind of extravagant meal? The large white rabbit was also shocked. It had stolen quite a lot of spirit medicines, but the ones he took out were all 1,000-year-old treasured medicines, even making its heart tremble. Ah! But it immediately screamed again. It turned out that Hunyo couldn't help but bite it again. As Ling Han cooked, he was curious, and said, "Ruffian rabbit, you're a spiritual infant tier expert at any rate, why are you like a punching bag?" This made him think of Helian Sun Shue, but he didn't know where this Hai Nyo went now. After a while, he really missed her a bit. Uncle Rabbit doesn't stoop to the level of a child. The large white rabbit said proudly, but when Hunyo revealed her eerie little white teeth again, it hurriedly leaped in fright and fled behind Ling Han. "Rabbit, come play with Nyo." Hunyo went to catch. "Let's play eagle catches chicks. Nyo is the eagle, and if you're caught by Nyo, Nyo will eat you." She spread her figure, and like a flash of lightning, she grabbed at the large white rabbit. "Motherfucker, you still want to eat Uncle Rabbit, your uncle." The large white rabbit hurriedly broke into a run. One human and one rabbit ran around the bonfire. One was fast, and the other wasn't slow either. They actually couldn't catch up or get rid of each other, fighting to a draw. Ling Han was leisurely and contented, cooking the soup without any distractions. "Aren't you going to do something about it?" Qin Lian you couldn't help but say. "Don't care, it'll stop to eat when it's done," Ling Han said indifferently. This was really irresponsible, no wonder he taught such a fierce little girl like Hunyo. As expected, when the iron pot emitted an alluring fragrance, Hunyo immediately stopped and sat down properly. However, she couldn't help but stare impatiently and start drooling. "Give Uncle Rabbit's eagle butt." The large white rabbit also sat down, but stayed far away from Hunyo. "Rabbits also eat meat?" Ling Han couldn't help but ask with a smile. The thieving eagle ate who knows how many of Uncle Rabbit's ancestors and descendants. "Uncle Rabbit is taking revenge," the large white rabbit said seriously. "Pa, it's obviously gluttonous." Ling Han scooped out the eagle butt, picked up a spirit ginseng, poured some soup over it, and handed it to the large white rabbit. "This eagle was killed not long ago. It was in the flower blossom tier, and was a great tonic for them. Unfortunately, it wasn't a king among beasts." Everyone got their share of ginseng soup and started eating. This eagle's meat was fatty, and the essence of the treasured ginseng was all squeezed into the soup, which could be said to be both fresh and nourishing. Everyone ate until they were glowing all over, with vein-like patterns moving. When Ling Han cooked it, he incorporated alchemy methods, extracting all the essence of the treasured ginseng and intertwining it with the Tao of heaven and earth, so it was naturally a mess of nourishment. After eating the soup, Ling Han also took out spirit peaches, one for each person since they wouldn't be able to digest more. Everyone meditated to refine the benefits they ate, and as time passed, the essence would naturally be lost. In this meal, Ling Han, Hunyo, and the large white rabbit ate the most. Ling Han and Hunyo were big eaters in the first place, and the large white rabbit's tier was higher, and it was also a bit of a freak, eating no less than Ling Han and Hunyo. It drank bowl after bowl of soup, not knowing what was embarrassed at all. After a long while, everyone stood up one by one, revealing a satisfied expression as they benefited greatly. However, Yi Rong should have waited for a long time. "That's a bit embarrassing. He shouldn't mind." Hee, everyone didn't have a good impression of Yi Rong, so they obviously didn't mind what he thought. "Let's go." They obviously didn't dare to go to the medicinal valley again. There was a large group of deity transformation tier beasts inside, and the waters were very deep. Carelessly wandering in would cause big trouble. They went to the agreed place. Although they didn't like Yi Rong, since they agreed, they weren't people who would go back on their words. Ling Han asked the ruffian rabbit about the origins of the medicinal valley. Chapter 622. What is the origin of that mountain valley? Why are there so many deity transformation tier demonic beasts? Ling Han was curious. They were deity transformation tier demonic beasts, and any one of them could rule over an entire mountain region. How could they possibly live together? The large white rabbit said, "Of course, there's a heaven-tier eagle king in the valley, purple jade azure eagle, an ancient remnant species, the king among kings, ruling over 10,000 beasts." Ling Han sighed. In the previous life, this eagle king was definitely an invincible existence, not as simple as a king among beasts, but a king among kings able to stand side by side with Sword Emperor and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. And in this life, such a beast king still had the chance to advance further and advance into the Shattering Void tier. If it really took that step, then it would truly be the strongest existence in the world, almost peerless. "You're quite daring to barge in," Ling Han said with a smile. "Rabbits and eagles can't coexist, so Uncle Rabbit obviously has to give that bastard trouble and steal all its spirit medicine. I definitely can't let it advance into the Shattering Void tier." The large white rabbit shouted. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Too bad, a heaven-tier king among beasts can teach you how to behave with one claw. Damn brat, do you know how to chat? Can't you say something nice?" The large white rabbit said unhappily. "Ah, biting your Uncle Rabbit again." Hu Nyo snorted, and said, "Don't be mean to Nyo's Ling Han, or else I'll eat you. Let go, let go." The large white rabbit only knew how to scream. As they spoke, they also arrived at the agreed rendezvous point. The small village was in sight, but the villagers all became corpse soldiers, already killed by Ling Han and the others earlier. "Why did you guys only come now?" Yi Rong appeared, and said unhappily to everyone. Did they know how long he waited? He was a genius that obtained direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy. How valuable was his time, and it actually took him half a day. "We ran into something," Qin Lianyu said, and recounted the Beast Tide riot. "What?" Yi Rong was shocked. "No wonder I felt the mountains crumble and the earth split earlier. So it was actually a beast tide erupting, and they were all deity transformation tier beasts. Lady Qin, fortunately you're all right." His eyes were burning as he looked at Qin Lianyu, so hot that it was somewhat unbearable. Ling Han replied with an "oh," then took out a spirit peach and threw it over, saying, "This is for you." Yi Rong subconsciously caught it. He was stunned for a moment before he said, "You guys actually managed to pick spirit peaches?" It was truly inconceivable. They had actually managed to pick spirit peaches in the midst of a beast tide. However, he used up a teleportation talisman in exchange for a spiritual peach. Even if it was a 7th-rank spiritual fruit, it was still too much of a loss. But who asked them to encounter a beast tide? Getting a spirit peach was better than getting nothing. Yi Rong gloomily put away the spirit peach. This was, after all, a 7th-rank spirit fruit. Of course, he couldn't eat it carelessly. It was best to save it for when he encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. Then, after eating the spirit fruit, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would interweave, and he might be able to break through. Seeing this, everyone shook their heads. One must know that they had casually eaten the spiritual fruits. Different people indeed had different fates. Why is there a rabbit? Yi Rong stared at the large white rabbit. A rabbit that could grow so big was undoubtedly a beast. Previously, Qin Lianyu only said that a beast tide had erupted, but didn't say that the beast tide this time was actually caused by the ruffian rabbit stealing the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. With Yi Rong's eyesight, he obviously couldn't see through a spiritual infant-tier beast rabbit. The ruffian rabbit revealed its true form and yelled at Yi Rong, "What? Uncle Rabbit will kick your face full of blood." The corner of Yi Rong's mouth instantly twitched. A beast that could actually speak was extremely inconceivable, but what was even more unexpected was that this rabbit's mouth was actually so despicable, capable of angering people to the point of exploding in a matter of minutes. This beast rabbit can actually speak. He suppressed the fury in his heart, and raised his head to confirm with Qin Lianyu. This was hard to believe. There were indeed beasts with intelligence that didn't lose to humans, But being able to speak human language was unheard of, not to mention being so ruffian. In the boundless world, nothing is too strange, Qin Lianyu said. Come, let's go to the Restore Heaven Academy, Ling Han said. Everyone set off again. The ruffian rabbit was very attentive to Ling Han. This human casually took out 1,000-year-old ginseng as a side dish, so he should be extremely wealthy, making it envious and staring at Ling Han to eat, yet it would always suffer Hunyou's sneak attacks. Who knew how many bites it received, and screaming was its daily routine. What was rare was that no matter how many times Hunyou abused it, it seemed to view Hunyou as its first love, always running and never thinking of counterattacking, making Ling Han click his tongue in wonder. It was truly a strange thing. After entering the Flying Flower County, travel-worn youngsters could be seen from time to time. Most of them weren't even 50 years old, and flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier cultivators over 50 years old could obviously be classified as young. However, those over 100 years old obviously wouldn't compete with youngsters, as they couldn't put down their old face. Isn't this Brother Yirong? Ling Han and the others just walked out of a small town and were about to hurry on their way when they saw a group of people walk out from the side. Someone recognized Yirong, and immediately called out with a pleasantly surprised expression. You are. Yirong hesitated slightly, he indeed didn't recognize the other party. I'm Ho Ji. The other party hurriedly introduced himself. A disciple of the Five Elements Valley. 2 years ago, I met Brother Yi on the 12 consecutive rings. At that time, Brother Yi won 12 consecutive victories, becoming one of the few winners since the 12 consecutive rings started, truly making me prostrate myself in admiration. Yirong gave an "oh" and revealed a look of realization. In reality, he only remembered the 12 consecutive rings, so how could he remember the people who were once below the stage? However, he became famous in a single battle on the 12 consecutive rings, and being mentioned by the other party, he couldn't help but feel pleased with himself. He revealed a proud expression, and instantly, his favorable impression of this person increased greatly. Come, let me introduce everyone. This is Brother Yirong, Flying Star Sect's outstanding disciple, and obtained the direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy. Ho Ji introduced to his friends. Everyone instantly cried out in surprise. What Flying Star Sect, 12 consecutive rings were all very abstract, but the phrase, direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy, could represent everything. An awesome genius. Instantly, those people all surrounded them, and none of them didn't reveal expressions of worship, greatly satisfying Yirong's vanity, and he was in no hurry to leave. Qin Lianyu couldn't help but cough and said, Can we be on our way? In front of young Master Yi, how are you qualified to speak? One person reprimanded Qin Lianyu, hurriedly flattering Yirong. Yirong instantly revealed a displeased expression, and said, This is Dark Glory Valley's Qin Lianyu. Lady Qin, my good friend, quickly apologized to Lady Qin. Once that person heard, how could he not know that Yirong was interested in Qin Lianyu? He hurriedly bowed, and said, I didn't know it was Lady Qin, I hope Lady Qin can forgive me. Qin Lianyu sneered, and said, Yirong, just accompany them. We can't afford to associate with an important person like you. She'd had enough of listening to him brag along the way. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 623. When was the last time he had come to the Heaven Sword sect? Ling Han couldn't help but look dazed, as if he had returned to 10,000 years ago. He had come here to concoct alchemical pills at the invitation of the Sword Emperor, and it was here that he had deceived the 3 styles of black origin. 10,000 years had passed, and it was as if nothing had changed here in the slightest. It was just like yesterday. Woo! The sound of a bugle horn rang out, and innumerable people flew out from various places in the mountains. This great mountain barrier formation had been broken, so the entire sect was naturally mobilized. The auras of elites rose and fell, and were shockingly terrifying. If these people joined forces and attacked together, would the lower realm instantly collapse? However, with the existence of the Eye of Heavenly Tao, it shouldn't be so. It would definitely interfere to maintain the stability of this realm. For the Eye of Heavenly Tao, as long as the order of this realm wasn't destroyed, it wouldn't care how many people were killed. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress and the Beast Snake King were both here, and counting them, the number of Shattering Void tier elites was actually in the hundreds. It could be seen that the 5 great sects had used up all their resources to fight a decisive battle to the death with the Purple Moon Empire here. After this battle, the world would be at peace. A feeling of disbelief rose up in Ling Han. This was too easy, wasn't it? Thinking again, the Purple Moon Empire certainly grasped overwhelming power. Even if Ma Duobao didn't make a move, the 8 kings had already beaten the 5 great sects to a pulp, and in the end, they could only defend this final place. Now that a decisive battle had occurred, it seemed reasonable. Esteemed guest, you've come from afar. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. An old man with an amiable expression walked out. He was tall and slender, with a head full of white hair and a white beard. Dressed in coarse hemp clothing, he exuded a sage-like air. When he walked out like this, even the Sword King and Azure Phoenix Divine Empress took a step back in unplanned unison, making way for him to take his place. Now, there were only 4 similarly white-haired old men, 4 men and 1 woman, that could stand side by side with this old man. They were definitely old antiques, and it was obvious that their vitality had declined. It was very strange. The 5 great sects obviously had the time source fluid, which could seal the loss of their own life force. After the reckoning, they could enter the immortal realm and break through again. Then, after becoming immortals, their lifespan would be terrifyingly increased. Hee, is this to deal with great enemies like us? The Justice Mountain King said with a sneer. In this world, one can't break through to the immortal realm, so the longer one spends, the more likely it is to go further in the Shattering Void tier, increasing battle prowess to 15 stars, 16 stars, or even higher, the Flame King continued. However, 14 stars is a threshold, and every subsequent star crossing is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even Shattering Void tier cultivators only have a lifespan of a little over 1,000 years, so what if they spend their entire life studying? Talent is there for all to see. If they can only reach 12 stars of battle prowess in their prime, then even if they die of old age, they'll at most reach 14 stars. The 8 kings spoke one after another, completely unconcerned, treating these 5 old men as if they were nothing. I've long heard that the 8 kings' heroism is matchless, and that their divine arts are invincible. Today, I've finally seen it for myself. The old antique from before was not angered. He smiled, and said, "Why don't we make a bet? A bunch of losers, what right do you have to make a bet with us?" The 8 kings sneered. "You don't dare." The old man goaded. Although the 8 kings' heroism reached the clouds, they definitely wouldn't act rashly, and none of them spoke. This time, they were here to pacify the 5 sects, so what bet? Yet Ma Duobao smiled, and asked, "What bet?" "We're cultivators, so what we bet is obviously strength," the old man said with a smile. The old man smiled and said, "Each side will send out 9 people to fight one-on-one. The side that wins 5 rounds will win this bet." The 8 kings were all stunned. Fight 9 rounds? Did you know that the 8 kings plus Ma Duobao just happened to be 9 people, and also happened to be the strongest battle force of the Purple Moon Empire? This kind of one-on-one duel could be said to be the Purple Moon Empire's strongest suit. Using one's weakness to fight another's strength, so stupid, but the 5 sects had so many old foxes, so how could they all be so stupid? Ma Duobao continued to ask, "What if we win, and what if we lose?" This was the key. Otherwise, even if they lost, it wouldn't hurt or itch, so if it was a bet, then so be it. That old man said, "If we lose, we'll submit to the Purple Moon Empire, and you can do whatever you want with us." When he said that, even the 8 kings were moved. Had the other party eaten too much, or was his brain damaged by a donkey's kick? Ma Duobao smiled as if he didn't mind at all, and said, "Then what if we lose? Within 100 years, no more fighting." That old man raised a finger. The conditions of this bet could be said to be extremely unfair. If the 5 sects lost, their lives would be dealt with at will, but if the Purple Moon Empire lost, they would only be unable to mobilize their troops within 100 years. For normal people, 100 years was a lifetime, but for Shattering Void tier elites, 100 years was only 10 years for normal people. Ma Duobao revealed a puzzled expression. The 5 sects could only rely on the number of Shattering Void tier elites. As the saying went, many ants could bite an elephant to death, and there was strength in numbers. However, he was naturally unafraid. Aside from himself, no one knew exactly how powerful his strength was. Now, the 5 sects gave up their advantage in numbers, and wanted to duel them one-on-one. This was practically pitifully stupid. What was the reason behind this? That old man raised another finger, and said with a smile, however, we have a restrictive condition. Was this the main point? And that is that your majesty cannot participate in the battle. Ma Duobao could not participate in the battle, which indeed meant that the Purple Moon Empire had one less super battle prowess, but the problem was that the 8 kings were practically invincible. Up until now, aside from the giant silver spider in the Fire Country's ancient mining area and Yi Shuang Shuang, there shouldn't be anyone alive with battle prowess of 15 stars of Shattering Void tier, right? Even if the 5 sects could find these two, and even if the 8 kings lost these 2 matches, well, wouldn't they still be able to guarantee a steady victory in 6 matches? Strange. Do you dare? The old general asked. Ma Duobao pondered slightly, then nodded, and said, all right, I accept this bet. After all, the other party had over 100 Shattering Void tier elites, and as long as a few of them managed to escape, they would wreak havoc in the world, which was enough to cause massive damage to the power of the nation. Thus, if they could subdue the enemy without fighting, this was the best strategy. The old man chuckled, and said, since that's the case, then we'll send someone out first for the first match, and rotate for the next match. Can your majesty make use of such an exchange? Yes. Ma Duobao agreed. And Yun, you'll fight in the first match, the old man said. Yes, the Sword King agreed. His figure soared into the air, and stopped 100 miles above the summit. He said, 8 kings, who will fight with me? I'll do it. The Lunar King also soared, and stood beside the Sword King. The first match was obviously the Purple Moon Empire's victory. The Sword King was indeed very strong, having comprehended Sword Heart, but he hadn't reached the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, and his battle prowess was only 11 stars. How could he rival the Lunar King? They weren't on the same level at all. Please. The Sword King wasn't afraid, and formed a sword technique in his hand, looking elegant and graceful. Chapter 624. The Rain Emperor was still domineering. His fists were densely woven with patterns, and as he punched, fist ray intertwined like a crimson dragon. He was truly a rare talent of the generation. After breaking free from the shackles of the imperial throne and leaving the desolate north, he improved astonishingly. Previously, in the Dark Devil Forest, he had only stepped into the Flower Blossom tier not long ago, but now he shockingly advanced into the Spiritual Infant tier. After advancing into the Spiritual Infant tier, the Rain Emperor looked a few years younger. Previously, he was a middle-aged man in his 40s, but now he was only in his 30s. Spiritual Infant tier cultivators had a lifespan of up to 500 years, and the Rain Emperor was only in his early 60s, which was equivalent to a 100-year-old man who had lived for over a dozen years, so he was naturally young. However, the increase in lifespan was an unnoticeable change, and the rejuvenation of appearance and body was much slower, only occurring when one broke through to the next tier. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The Rain Emperor probably had a shocking encounter recently, or else talent alone couldn't possibly have such improvement. The Rain Emperor cultivated Ray, and his battle prowess was naturally terrifying, so who could fight him? Ling Han looked towards the Rain Emperor's opponent. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s, similarly barehanded, and started a fierce exchange with the Rain Emperor, his fists wrapped with a shocking grand light. Peng, peng, peng. The two fought fiercely in the sky, and a shockwave could make many unable to escape in time. Many even joined forces to form a defense, but were unwilling to retreat further, wanting to watch the battle from a closer distance. That's not Rei. Ling Han saw clearly that although the fist of the young man that was exchanging blows with the Rain Emperor was also wrapped with grand light, it wasn't Rei, but many intertwined qi. Fake Rei. Come on, Xianyuan Ziguang wasn't the only one who cultivated fake Rei, there were still some geniuses like him. A quick count revealed that there were over 20 streams of qi. However, it was unclear exactly how many there were. It was because these streams of qi were too tightly entwined, and they were also enveloped by that person's martial will. It was impossible for outsiders to see them. However, even if there was so much qi, fake Rei was fake Rei, after all, and couldn't compare to real Rei. The Rain Emperor only condensed 10 flashes of qi to form Rei, yet had an overwhelming advantage. However, that opponent's grasp of martial arts techniques was extremely shocking, forcibly making up for the gap between qi and Rei. Who is that young man? Ling Han asked the people beside him. Oh? You don't even know him? That person was shocked. Ling Han smiled and said, should I know? You must have just come, said the man. Ling Han laughed heartily. You even managed to come out. I admire you. If you've been here for a long time, there's no way you wouldn't know about that show-off. Murong Qing of the southern region has been challenging all sorts of geniuses for the past half a month, but he hasn't suffered a single defeat until today. That's because none of the geniuses with direct entry qualifications are here. Otherwise, as long as any one of Small Saber King, Yao Huiyu, or Dong Ling came, wouldn't that be enough to take care of him? Someone interrupted from the side. However, this Murong Qing is indeed very powerful. I'm definitely no match for him. The first person sighed. The expression of the person who interrupted changed. He obviously wasn't Murong Qing's match, but he didn't want to admit it in public. He only snorted, and said, he just cultivated a few more years than me, or else I could easily suppress him. Ling Han swept a glance over him. This person was in the flower blossom tier, and looked to be in his early 30s, and judging from his blood qi, he was about that age. However, Murong Qing was much younger, at most 30. If one were to say who had cultivated a few more years, it would be him and not Murong Qing. This was really too sour. Ha, Murong Qing has met his match this time, the first person said with a laugh. Ling Han looked at the Rain Emperor, and said, then who's Murong Qing's opponent? A very low-key guy. Before he made his move, no one would have thought he'd be so fierce. They didn't even know he was actually an elite of the spiritual infant tier. The first person exclaimed. It seems like no one recognizes him. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, I do. He's called the Fist Emperor. Many people beside the Fist Emperor heard this, and all revealed shocked expressions. How could the word emperor be used carelessly? Emperor represented the pinnacle of martial art. In this era, if one wasn't an elite of the Shattering Void tier, who dared to call themselves emperor? Even someone as powerful as Small Saber King was only a king with the word small in it. The Fist Emperor represented the pinnacle of the art of fists. No one who used fists was his match, which was why he could be crowned with such a title. Ling Han said unhurriedly, believe me, in the future, he'll definitely live up to his name. The greatest genius of the desolate north wasn't Kenyi, but this Rain Emperor. In comparison, Kenyi still lacked that domineering aura, so he prostrated himself at Ling Han's feet. However, if it was the Rain Emperor, no matter how much help or how much pressure he was given, he would only be grateful, but not condescend. This was the domineering aura of an emperor, and also the temperament that an ultimate elite had to possess. Those people nearby naturally didn't believe it. Though the spiritual infant tier was very strong, there was no lack of deity transformation, heaven tier, and shattering void tier cultivators in the middle state. With the suppression of 3 great tiers of elites, how could it be easy to become an emperor? Murong Qing and the Rain Emperor were still locked in a fierce battle. Between the two, one was superior in terms of martial arts techniques, and his whole body was exuding a green divine light, while the other had long since condensed into a ray, and the power of his fists was terrifying. He also had a natural sensitivity towards martial art, and could improve himself in battle, becoming stronger the more he fought. They fought for a whole day and night, yet there was still no clear victor, and finally, they shook hands and made up. Both of them were geniuses of fists, and could not help but appreciate each other. After they landed, they began to discuss. Ling Han walked over, and said with a smile, "Lord Rain Emperor, long time no see." Ling Han. The Rain Emperor walked over, and couldn't help but laugh loudly, full of heroic spirit. At first, I thought that my cultivation speed was already fast enough, but compared to yours, it immediately pales in comparison. He had just broken through to the spiritual infant tier, and Ling Han was already in the late stage of the flower blossom tier. Though there was still a barrier of a great tier between them, he believed that for a monster like Ling Han, this barrier wouldn't be able to hold him back for long. Ling Han, however, truly admired the Rain Emperor. He could ignore the barrier of a great tier, and that was because he had the experience of others. However, the Rain Emperor was born in the desolate north, and relied on his own hard work and talent to consecutively break through to the flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier in a short 2 years. This was the truly impressive thing. Even in his last life, even if the Sword Emperor and the others were dragged out, they wouldn't be able to compare. Of course, this was because the Rain Emperor had been stuck in the spiritual pedestal tier for too long, and had also absorbed power of the nation for many years, which allowed him to directly soar to the 9 heavens the moment he left the shallow waters. After this, the Rain Emperor definitely wouldn't be able to maintain such a high speed anymore. Come, Morong, let me introduce to you. This is Ling Han. The Rain Emperor grabbed Ling Han's hand, and turned to Morong Qing. Flower blossom tier. Morong Qing looked surprised. He had never thought that the Rain Emperor would actually be so cordial towards a junior of the flower blossom tier. So what if you're in the flower blossom tier? If you're not convinced, Uncle Rabbit will kick your face until it's bloody. Who would have thought that Rabbit would be the first to fly into a rage? Peng, its feet kicked Morong Qing's butt, and with a peng, Morong Qing's whole body was stabbed into the soil. Chapter 625. The people nearby all had strange expressions on their faces. To be able to come here, one had to at least be in the spiritual pedestal tier, and usually, they had gone to many historical sites and abodes to gain experience and had seen many strange things, but a rabbit actually opened its mouth and spoke the human language, which still made them dizzy from shock. Moreover, this rabbit was very fierce. It had sent Morong Qing flying with a single kick. Its strength was obvious to all. Xiao! Morong Qing jumped to his feet, looked left and right and said, "Who dares to sneak attack me?" Seeing that everyone's gazes were fixed on a large white rabbit, his face involuntarily twisted as he exclaimed, "This damned rabbit can even speak. Die your whole family!" Rabbit's legs kicked out and rushed out, fighting Morong Qing. Lord Rabbit's 18 eagle kicks. Peng, 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 peng. The rabbit's speed was extremely fast. As it bounced around, its legs kicked wildly at Morong Qing. "Stupid rabbit, I have no enmity with you. Kick your sister!" raged Morong Qing. "You still dare to scold your Lord Rabbit? If I don't kick you, who else should I kick?" Rabbit squawked and kicked non-stop. Don't say that the rabbit was bitten by Hunyo all day, and acted like a good person, but that was only towards Hunyo alone. When it came to others, it was a standard gangster rabbit, full of ruffian talk and rude and overbearing. A man and a rabbit clashed. Soon, they rose into the air and engaged in a fierce battle. "Ignore them." Ling Han chuckled. He had finally figured it out. Although Morong Qing's talent in martial art was shocking, he was also an idiot. It was better to let him and the gangster rabbit be brothers. When you've had enough, you'll naturally stop. Zhu Xian'er had learned this phrase from Ling Han. Ling Han told the Rain Emperor about what had happened in these 2 years, and the Rain Emperor suddenly said, "I think, You shouldn't have to worry that someone will make a move against you because of the whereabouts of the divine treasury. What do you mean? Ling Han seemed very curious. When Yi Jian came to the Central Plains not long ago, and separately went to the Heaven Sword Sect, Absolute Saber Sect, and other ancient sections. Now, these sects jointly announced that no one is allowed to kill Wen Yi Jian, or else they will become enemies with these sections. Come to think of it, when Yi Jian told the news of the divine treasure trove to those sects in exchange for protection, Rain Emperor explained. Oh, there was actually such a thing. Ling Han thought about it and had to admit the helplessness and decisiveness of Wen Yi Jian's action. Ling Han didn't have the Black Tower, and not to mention encountering a shattering void tier elite, even if a deity transformation tier elite came, he would have nowhere to run. To him, not only did the divine treasures not bring him any benefits, they would also restrict his development. Hiding silently in the mountains and forests his entire life, what future could he have? Could he advance into the shattering void tier, and then become a god? Since he couldn't become a god, wasn't the divine treasury just empty talk? On the contrary, not only did he not suffer any loss by handing over the coordinates of the divine treasures, he could even negotiate with the major sects and obtain some benefits. If his luck was heaven-defying, he would still be able to fight for that divine treasury after he entered the god realm. If he didn't have the Black Tower, perhaps he could only be like Wen Yi Jian. Now that the coordinates of the divine treasure trove had fallen into the hands of a few great ancient sects, there wasn't much meaning for others to seize it. You couldn't even enter the shattering void tier, so could you go to the divine realm to dig for treasures? Wen Yi Jian coming like this also helped Ling Han resolve a crisis. Wen Yi Jian also obtained the qualification to enter the academy directly, Rain Emperor said again. Ling Han nodded. Whether it was Wen Yi Jian's own strength or his credit for selling the divine treasure trove, it was an easy matter to win a direct entry spot. Do you know the examination rules for entering the academy? He asked. I'm not sure for now, but since it's a martial art genius, it's unavoidable to fight, Rain Emperor said indifferently, full of aggressiveness. Ling Han nodded. Rain Emperor only lacked a complete cultivation technique that would allow him to finally advance into the shattering void tier. And in martial art, Rain Emperor already created his own fist technique and walked his own path, no longer needing martial arts techniques. Only mystical powers could increase his battle prowess. After speaking for a while, Ling Han took out a large pot and began to cook the food. An alluring aroma wafted out, and not only did the people in the vicinity drool, the man and the rabbit in the sky also stopped fighting and descended, their eyes fixed on the lid of the pot. Hu Niu was fierce and jumped out to say, "Don't have any ideas on Niu's food." She was very protective of her food. After the food was cooked, everyone started to eat. Their group's strength was tyrannical. Whether it was Ling Han, Hu Niu, Rain Emperor, or Mu Rongqing, they actually all had the qualification to enter the academy directly. Now that the four gathered together, they could even sweep away spiritual infant tier warriors, who dared to provoke them. Thus, although everyone was drooling secretly and was even more curious about a beast that could speak, no one came to disturb them. Mu Rongqing was an idiot as expected, and soon put his arm around the rabbit's shoulder and called him brother, making Hu Niu laugh at him for being in the company of beasts, making this guy extremely depressed. It was very lively here, with battles happening every day. Geniuses from all over the world weren't convinced of each other's superiority, and would fight as they talked. Because too many geniuses gathered, some people who clearly didn't want to enter and didn't have the qualifications to come also came, setting up stalls nearby and selling all sorts of things. On the second day, Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing both went to the nearby forest to search for beasts to fight fiercely. Who knew, they might even obtain rare metals, spirit medicines, and other treasures. Otherwise, how could they just sit here for half a year? Ling Han still just arrived, and he started to walk around in high spirits. There were a large number of stalls in the outer area, with a lot of items laid out. Some were unremarkable low-level spirit medicines, some were ancient tools dug out from ancient ruins. There were some that could be used, and some that couldn't be used, depending on his judgment. Zhu Xian'er accompanied him, while Hunyou held on to Ling Han's hand, appearing to be very impatient. Ling Han just took a glance, and the little girl pulled him to leave, making Ling Han very puzzled. Wasn't shopping a woman's favorite daily activity? Yu, Zhu Xian'er, were so engrossed. After walking for a while, they saw a group of people surrounding a small stall, appearing to be very lively. Ling Han also squeezed in. It turned out that everyone was interested in a bottle. This was truly an old item. The body was tattered, and the patterns on it were all blurred. The mouth of the bottle was even cracked, but even so, it still gave people a feeling of grandeur. The stall owner was an old man with spiritual infant-tier cultivation, making people not dare to snatch it by force. Old senior, what kind of treasured tool is this? Ling Han asked. Refined celestial bottle, the old man said indifferently. Ling Han was startled. The refined celestial refiner had such big words, actually wanting to refine an immortal spirit, but why? This ancient object couldn't possibly have such might, and the vein-like patterns on it were almost completely obliterated. How much? He asked again. If the price wasn't high, there was no harm in playing with it. Using treasured medicine to exchange for it can extend life, the old man said. Although he was very powerful, he was too old, and his qi and blood were dried up. Obviously, he didn't have many years left to live. For such an existence, there was nothing more precious than a treasured medicine that could prolong life. But who didn't want to live long? Treasured medicine that could prolong life was also the most precious spirit medicine, with a price but no supply. No wonder so many people didn't make a move. It wasn't that everyone didn't want to make a move, but the old man's asking price was too high, and not many people could afford it. Even if there was it really worth it to exchange for such a broken bottle? Chapter 626. Ling Han didn't care much. He had the Black Tower, so cultivating spirit medicine was extremely easy, and ginseng had the effect of consolidating one's vitality and prolonging one's lifespan. Especially 1,000-year-old ginseng, its effects were even more outstanding. To him, 1,000-year-old ginseng was like a carrot. Plucking as many as he wanted, he didn't feel the slightest heartache. Everyone, don't be fooled. A man suddenly stood out, pointing at the bottle, and said, how could this be refined into a divine spirit? The vein-like patterns have already been obliterated, so how much power could be left? Moreover, how could there be a treasure to refine a divine spirit in the mortal realm? If it really was that powerful, wouldn't this person be able to wipe out the Heaven's Sword sect and the Absolute Saber sect? Could it be that those places still lack treasured medicines? Everyone couldn't help but nod. This bottle was indeed extraordinary, but if it was destroyed, how much power could it have? To exchange for the most precious life-prolonging treasured medicine, who would be willing? Boss, make it cheaper. I have 100,000 origin crystals here, how about it, exchange? I have 3 green sun pills. I'll use a 5th-tier green hell gold to exchange. Everyone offered a price they could accept. This treasured tool was still quite attractive. Even if it was already damaged, and the will of martial art was about to be obliterated, there was still an immortal aura circulating, tempting them. Not exchanging. The old man insisted. He didn't have much lifespan left and didn't have any descendants, so he only wanted to live a few more years. Other treasures were of no use, and could only be buried with him. That 300-year-old knotweed, someone offered. Knotweed was a top-notch tonic, and 300-year-old was even more impressive. It could at least extend one's lifespan by about 10 years. The old man revealed a hesitant expression. This treasured medicine was lower than his expectations, but after being belittled by the man before, this bottle didn't seem to be sold for too high a price, making him somewhat tempted. This should be a replica of the refined celestial bottle. How could the real thing fall into the mortal realm, and how could it be damaged? It was still the man who spoke belittling before. He kept observing the bottle. Although it's not the real thing, and it's very damaged, it still has some research value. He paused for a moment and said, then I'll offer 2 200-year-old dark cloud ginseng. The dark cloud ginseng was also a life-prolonging spirit herb. A 200-year-old dark cloud ginseng could also extend one's life by about 10 years. However, the effects of this kind of spirit herb could not be stacked. Consuming the first stalk would give one full effect, but consuming the second stalk would only give one half of the effect. After that, the effects would become increasingly worse. Therefore, the effect of 2 dark cloud ginseng could only extend one's life for 15 years at most. But to a person who had 1 foot in the grave, living for another 5 years was an irresistible temptation. The old man raised his eyebrows. He had wanted to agree before, and now that he could live for another 5 years, he was even more tempted. Ling Han smiled and said, "I offer 1,000-year-old white jade ginseng." Hiss! Everyone cried out in surprise. 1,000-year-old ginseng? Are you joking? Even if ginseng is a spirit medicine that can live for a long time, 1,000 years should be the limit. Basically, very few ginseng can grow to such an age. Just like humans had a lifespan of 100 years, how many mortals could live for 100 years? Moreover, there were so many people in the world who wanted to eat ginseng, and the older it was, the rarer it was. A 100-year-old could be regarded as a flower blossom tear cultivator, which was pitifully rare. Those over 500 years were like deity transformation tear cultivators, and those over 1,000 years were like shattering void tear cultivators, which could be counted on one hand. This brat opened his mouth and offered 1,000-year-old treasured medicine. He had to be joking. Even the old man was somewhat doubtful and said, "Young man, are you serious?" Ling Han raised his hand, threw out a ginseng, and said, "You can test it." The old man took it and carefully observed the ginseng. In fact, he wasn't very knowledgeable, but 1,000-year-old ginseng's medicinal power was strong, and he could sense it by smelling it. The old man was immediately sure that even if it wasn't 1,000-year-old, it was at least 800 or 900 years old. This was enough to extend his life by more than 30 years. He was obviously overjoyed and said, "Okay, this bottle is yours." "Wait." The man who belittled before spoke, looking at Ling Han with a cold gaze, and paused before saying, "I offer 3 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng." A 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng obviously couldn't compare to 1,000-year-old white jade ginseng, but with the addition of 3, it naturally surpassed. Everyone was puzzled at first. "Didn't you say that this bottle was broken and worthless? Why did you take out 3 treasured medicines to exchange for it?" They immediately understood that this man deliberately belittled before, on one hand to reduce competition, and on the other, he wanted to get the treasured tool at the lowest price. Now that he encountered a strong competitor, he could only increase the price if he still wanted the bottle. For Ling Han, although 1,000-year-old ginseng wasn't valuable at all, he didn't want to waste it carelessly. After all, this bottle was indeed too damaged, and other than being able to refer to ancient techniques, it was practically useless. But why was this man so proactive, even unscrupulous? Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth and looked at the bottle. He saw that the bottle was indeed severely damaged, and even if it could still display its power, it would first collapse. However, there was a layer of dazzling light at the bottom of the bottle, so intense that it was like a small sun, almost burning his eyes blind. A treasure! Ling Han's heart shook violently. Those were vein-like patterns, so dazzling that even he couldn't bear it. It was definitely not simple. He no longer hesitated. Even if this bottle wasn't useful at all, it was worth it just for those vein-like patterns. He threw out another 1,000-year-old ginseng and said, "Then I'll use 2." According to age, 3 700-year-old yellow dragon ginseng were still above 2,000-year-old white jade ginseng, but considering that the effects of this kind of longevity medicine decreased the more one ate it, the effects of 3 yellow dragon ginseng couldn't compare to 2,000-year-old white jade ginseng at all. Anyone could calculate this kind of score, and the old man was naturally immediately tempted, but he still looked at the man from before. Should you increase the price? In any case, he would sell the item to the person who offered the highest price, maximizing his profits. That man looked at Ling Han and said, "I'll add a heart protection pill." The heart protection pill was an extremely precious medicinal pill. It could allow martial artists under the deity transformation tier to preserve their lives and slowly heal their injuries no matter how severe their injuries were. It was also a top-notch existence among Earth-grade middle-level medicinal pills. The old man was instantly tempted. With this kind of spirit pill, he could go to an ancient site and take an adventure. He might be able to obtain a fated chance, advance into the deity transformation tier, and snatch another 200 years of lifespan from the hands of the heavens. This was much better than any life-prolonging spirit medicine. Ling Han laughed out loud. Competing with him, the Alchemy Emperor, in terms of alchemical pills? He lacked the materials for heaven-grade alchemical pills, so he could only concoct one, but he had plenty of Earth-grade alchemical pills. "I'll add 2 more heart protection pills," he said. Pooh! Around them, many people had already spurted out. Were these 2 guys sure they were talking about Earth-grade medicinal pills? Why did it feel like they were cheap and common goods? Chapter 627. Ma Duobao didn't take it to heart in the slightest and said, "Come at me together. There's no need for you to say that, we have the same intention." Zhuo Qifang, Wu Gaoyuan, and the other 4 prodigies of the immortal realm, together with the 2 18-eyed corpse kings, this lineup was truly terrifying to the point of making one's hair stand on end. Battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier is extremely rare even in the immortal realm. I'd really like to see it for myself. Unfortunately, so what if it's 20 stars of battle prowess? The gap between the immortal tier is too big, and the difference between breaking through 10 stars of Shattering Void tier and 20 stars of Shattering Void tier isn't very big, so there's absolutely no need to attack this limit. After today, there will be no more Purple Moon Kingdom. Zhuo Qifang and the others all sneered, their words filled with disdain. Ling Han, however, shook his head. It was precisely because the gap between each tier of the immortal tier was too big that it was necessary to cultivate each tier below it to perfection. Otherwise, what right did those so-called 1-star geniuses and 2-star geniuses have to be stronger than others? Zhuo Qifang and the others said so only because they had no way of reaching the height of 20 stars. Any random person from the 5 great sects of the immortal realm would be able to sweep through the entire vast lands if they weren't suppressed by the power of the realm. But the 5 great sects might not be some top-notch force in the immortal realm, so the younger generation that they nurtured might not be able to cultivate to perfection in every tier. However, being able to reach 18 stars in the Shattering Void tier was already extremely extraordinary. At least in the vast lands, Ma Duobao and Helian Tianyun, 2 freaks, had only appeared in who knew how many millennia ago. Ma Duobao casually raised his hand, and attacked the 7 great elites. Hey! The 5 great geniuses all attacked in unison. Wu Gaoyuan even brandished the mountain and river axe, and as the axe's surface swept past, even space itself was torn apart. The 2 18-eyed corpse kings were unafraid of Ma Duobao's strength, and directly faced him head-on. Peng, peng, the 2 great corpse kings were immediately sent flying back, but with their clash, the might of Ma Duobao's attack was greatly reduced, and Zhuo Qifang and the others could easily receive it. This also showed how powerful Ma Duobao was. It was only a casual attack, and it actually required 7 great elites with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier's battle prowess to work together to be able to match it. Ping, ping, pang, pang, they very quickly became a mess. Both sides definitely had their ultimate moves that they hadn't used, fighting all the way from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, and then to the sky. One after another, stars fell, as if it was the end of the world. Fortunately, the stars in the sky were formed from the power of heaven and earth, and could be continuously replenished. Otherwise, with the way the elites fought, the sky full of stars wouldn't be able to withstand such torment no matter how many there were. Have you guys washed your necks clean? The heavenly astral king said with a sneer. Although they, the 8 kings, couldn't be considered second-tier elites now, with 18 stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess appearing, 15 stars of battle prowess was still in the 3rd tier. Although there were only 8 of them, they had enough confidence to defeat the 5 sects over 100 Shattering Void tier elites. Boasting shamelessly. Several white-haired antiques began to burn their chi and blood. Hong, a terrifying power erupted from their bodies, and in an instant, their battle prowess soared to 14 stars. The 5 sects, sure enough, had deep roots. Normally, as long as they advanced into the Shattering Void tier, the elites of the 5 sects would choose to seal themselves, and wait until the end of the reckoning to enter the immortal level before continuing to cultivate. This way, they would achieve twice the result with half the effort. However, there were also a few who chose not to seal themselves, and instead continued to cultivate, leaving themselves only a few dozen years before using the time source fluid. They were known as Protector Guardians. If they encountered a major event that threatened the survival of the 5 sects, though this was unlikely to happen, they would unseal themselves and come out to eliminate the danger. However, because their lifespan was already nearing its end, they had to burn their chi and blood every time they fought. This was actually using up their lifespan as the price, further shortening their lifespan that was not much in the first place. Even if they entered into the immortal realm in the future, they might not necessarily have enough time to advance into the immortal level. This required a considerable amount of awareness and courage, so the Protector Guardians were also the most respected. Even Zhuo Qifang and the other prodigies of the immortal realm were extremely polite and respectful to them. There were a total of 5 such Protector Guardians, 4 of whom had battle prowess of 14 stars of Shattering Void tier, and the last had reached 15 stars of Shattering Void tier. With the addition of these 5 people, the power of the 5 sects naturally soared. Kill! Though the Lunar King was a woman, her temper was the most violent, and she was the first to charge out. 8 forms of Lunar Yin. The moment she came out, she used her ultimate move. Her 2 slender hands turned into gigantic palms that covered the skies and covered the earth, slapping downwards with peng, peng, peng. The other 7 kings naturally wouldn't sit still, and charged out one after another. Ling Han, on the other hand, became completely unaffected. He stroked his chin, and muttered to himself, "Do I still need to make a move?" The Revere Life Sword was no longer glowing. Just now, it was actually Ma Duobao who was controlling it from a distance. Now, Ma Duobao himself had to face a strong enemy, so he naturally didn't have the spare time to control the Revere Life Sword. Though Ling Han's defense was the best, and perhaps not one of the best, his destructive power was completely insignificant in front of a Shattering Void tier elite. Whether he made a move or not didn't seem to change anything. "Ling Han, I'll be your opponent." Su Xiao ran out with the absolute saber in hand. Ling Han fanned his hands, and said, "I can't be bothered to fight with you. You're too weak now." Su Xiao trembled in anger. He was still a well-known figure among the younger generation of the whole world. Even in the immortal realm, those who comprehended Saber Heart could still be called geniuses, though they were no longer so rare. "You're looking down on me too much. What if you add me? And me? Me?" Dong Ling the Small Sword Emperor, and the Son of Lightning all took a step forward, their gazes cold. Ling Han shook the Revere Life Sword, and said, "All right, I'll send you guys to hell, and let you guys atone for the innocent blood shed by your ancestors. You're all just ants. Isn't it only right for you to make some contributions to the immortal realm?" The Son of Lightning said with a hideous grin. He had already drawn out the imitation mountain river axe, and there was a sliver of realm power condensed within it. Its might was similarly not to be underestimated. Ling Han's expression hardened. He raised his sword horizontally, pointed it at the Son of Lightning, and said, "Just because of these words, you deserve to die. Then you'll have to be able to kill me first." The Son of Lightning laughed loudly, and brandished the mountain river axe in an attack. This treasured tool had already awakened, and was exuding a terrifying might. Unfortunately, the Revere Life Sword did not react at all. Could it be that the battle with extremely resplendent brilliance just now had consumed too much of its energy? This was not impossible. The mountain river axe could be said to be this realm's strongest spirit tool, and added with Wu Gaoyuan's strength, how terrifying would it be? Yet it was blocked by the Revere Life Sword. Although it was under Ma Duobao's control, it must have been greatly exhausted, so it was normal that it could not unleash its might now. Ha ha ha. When Su Xiu Ran arrived, he could not help but laugh loudly. If this sword of yours could not awaken, how could it possibly be a match for them? He, too, awakened the absolute saber, and slashed at Ling Han. Once these two spirit tools awakened, they would have the battle prowess of the shattering void tier. Furthermore, they would at least be at the level of 10 stars, which was even stronger than the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. This far surpassed Ling Han's own battle prowess. Chapter 628. A Beautiful Romance. Small Tower did not respond. It was unknown whether it was too lazy to respond, or because it had lost its memory, and did not know. Ling Han did not receive an answer, but he was not disappointed. He had only asked casually, and did not really expect to receive an answer from Small Tower. He carefully studied these vein-like patterns, and pondered over the profoundness within. I seem to understand a little, Ling Han said to himself. The bottom of the bottle was actually a spirit tool, and after he poured his divine sense into it, the profoundness of the spirit tool was displayed to him. That elder said this was a refined celestial bottle, which was naturally too exaggerated. However, the bottom of this bottle is flat on the outside and concave on the inside. It is actually a bowl. The interior has its own space, and it can absorb all things and refine them into the most basic spiritual essence. Isn't this equivalent to refining origin crystals? Ling Han was very astonished. He continuously moved this bowl, and now, it was a stone bowl. It was very small, and the mouth of the bowl was only the size of a palm, but the interior could form a very large space. It was very amazing. He pulled out the 5 spirit medicines, and then took out the stone bowl. Spiritual power poured into it, and the veins on the body of the bowl immediately lit up. The entire stone bowl became resplendent, and released a powerful attractive force. Those 5 spirit medicines immediately flew up, and they disappeared into the bowl. As expected, there was another space inside. The spirit medicines were obviously bigger than the stone bowl itself, but they were swallowed cleanly by the stone bowl without any difficulty. In a short while, Ling Han smelled a fragrance coming from the stone bowl. He looked again, and saw that there were no spirit medicines left in the bowl. They had turned into a drop of light green liquid, emitting a fragrance that refreshed the heart and refreshed the mind. Those were 5 spirit medicines, and each of them was 5th tier, but only a drop of medicinal liquid was formed. This was too exaggerated. Ling Han retracted his origin power, and the stone bowl instantly lost its brilliance and became extremely plain. It looked like an old antique. He turned the stone bowl upside down, and poured it towards his mouth. That green drop slowly fell, and it landed in his mouth. Instantly, an indescribable fragrance filled his mouth, making him feel as if he was about to ascend to heaven and become an immortal. But what was even more astonishing was that the incredibly pure energy flowed down his throat into his stomach, and then spread, circulating throughout his entire body. What pure medicinal energy! Ling Han sighed ruefully. Normally, no matter if it was spirit medicine or alchemical pills, most of them only had the effect of accumulating origin power, but starting from the flower blossom tier, what martial artists needed more was comprehension of Tao. For example, in the flower blossom tier, if one wanted their Tao flower to grow, they would have to inscribe the intent of martial art on it. This was nourishment. An alchemy grandmaster like Ling Han could extract the will of the heavens and earth from medicinal herbs. Eating it would allow one to connect with the great Tao, thus promoting the improvement of one's martial art. However, this stone bowl served the same purpose. There were great Tao patterns in the spiritual liquid. It was incomparably astonishing. That's equivalent to an alchemy grandmaster. Furthermore, after a 5th-tier material is purified, it actually has a 6th-tier effect. This has even surpassed the effect of medicinal pills. Not only can medicinal ingredients be refined, but even spirit stones and rare metals can be refined. Even living beings are fine. I understand now why our predecessors sealed it in another spirit artifact to conceal its existence. That thing is truly heaven-defying, even harming the harmony of the world. If it fell into the hands of an evil person, it could be used to refine the common people to nourish themselves. That would be too dangerous. Ling Han sighed. The predecessors probably couldn't bear to destroy such a precious treasure, so they threw the bright pearl into the dark, burying it in another spirit tool. Tools are not divided into good or bad, depending on the intentions of the user. Ling Han said seriously, I definitely won't use this to harm all living beings in the world. Otherwise, even if I could obtain an endless supply of spiritual liquid, my heart would be shrouded by a demonic barrier, so how far could I advance in martial art? He cultivated the path of the strongest, not the emotionless, slaughtering path. Otherwise, for the latter two, using this stone bowl to slaughter all living beings would be more in line with the path they chose. Small tower, I seem to have obtained something incredible. Ling Han said with a smile. Small tower appeared, stared at the stone bowl for a while, and said, I remember, this should be the heaven transformation bowl. However, this definitely isn't the real thing. In my hazy memory, the heaven transformation bowl was shattered long ago, and this is an imitation. It's not bad, right? If you give it to me, I can extract 7 flashes of source power. Only 7? Ling Han thought and said, that large chaos source rock, how much source power did you extract? 9, Small Tower said calmly. This stone bowl was actually not as strong as that chaos source rock. Wait, the chaos source rock was something that even Azura Demon Emperor went crazy for, and how big was its volume? The stone bowl was so small, yet it could extract 7 flashes of source power, so its material was not inferior at all. It was like a piece of godly metal that was only 3 kilograms, yet forged into a level 10 spirit tool, while the other piece of godly metal that was 5 kilograms was the original embryo. Then, according to Small Tower's calculations, the latter was definitely more valuable, but for martial artists, it was 100 times more valuable than the former. From a different perspective, every item's value was different. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. This stone bowl couldn't replace alchemical pills because it could only extract the purest energy, unlike alchemical pills that were varied and had various uses. However, because it had the effect of purification, it could allow level 5 medicinal ingredients to have level 6 effects, which was very useful. There were too many low-level spirit herbs in the Black Tower that originally had no use, but now, with the Heaven Transformation Bowl's purification, level 3 became level 4 became level 5, and waste could be reused. Ling Han tried it. He pulled out large amounts of level 3 medicinal ingredients and absorbed them into the Heaven Transformation Bowl for purification, quickly turning them into over 30 drops of liquid. However, he didn't stop and continued to urge the Heaven Transformation Bowl. These drops of liquid once again fused and purified into 1 drop. He tasted it and couldn't help but smile. This was equivalent to a 2-star origin crystal, but it was easier to absorb because it was directly ingested. 2-star origin crystal could only be refined by spiritual pedestal tier elites, and was equivalent to level 5 treasured medicine. Level 3 medicinal ingredients became level 5. Although the quantity was pitifully small, it was a qualitative change. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. The Black Tower and Heaven Transformation Bowl were practically a perfect match. His figure flashed, and he exited the Black Tower. Strange, why did this Brett suddenly appear? Rabbit saw him and couldn't help but shout out loudly. Ling Han laughed, and said, my Qinggong is getting more and more awesome. This was definitely not Qinggong. Rabbit was certain that with its senses that were a whole tier higher, if Ling Han leaped over from afar, it would definitely be able to detect him. It's about time, we can go to the banquet, Ling Han said with a smile. The 3 of them set out, having already inquired about it before, so they knew where to go now. After passing through a forest, a side courtyard suddenly appeared in front of them. It occupied a large area, and there was actually a lake inside. This was definitely recently built, the walls and tiles were all very new. The Wang family was really extravagant. Their young miss cultivated here, and they built a side courtyard here. Not only that, starting from the main entrance of the side courtyard, there was a road paved with bluestone. It extended all the way for several miles, and on both sides were large patches of trees. Move to the side. A carriage drove over, and the coachman shouted coldly. Chapter 629. Ling Han didn't mind giving way, but this coachman shouted and actually lashed out with a whip, appearing extremely arrogant and overbearing. And this was only a coachman. If the coachman was so arrogant and overbearing, then what kind of person was the master? Ling Han frowned, and pointed out with the index finger of his right hand. His anger was not obvious, and his finger just happened to touch the whip. However, this whip that was like a spirit snake immediately seemed to have been hit where it hurt and instantly withered. How dare you? The coachman's gaze was cold, and he raised the whip, about to lash out again. You want to do it a second time? Ling Han stretched out his hand and grabbed the whip that the coachman hadn't retracted in time, and pulled hard. Ah! The coachman was instantly sent flying, and the terrifying origin power passed through the whip, causing considerable damage to the carriage and horses. The carriage immediately stopped, and the coachman also fell into the bushes on the side, groaning. Ma Tong, why did the carriage stop? A young man's voice came from inside the carriage, carrying some dissatisfaction. Could it be that we've already arrived? Replying, young master, we're still a bit short, but there are a few madmen blocking the way. This lowly one wanted to chase them away, and was even injured by one of the madmen. The coachman stood up with difficulty, but made a false accusation. Humph! The carriage door opened, and a slender man walked out. He was very young, only about 24 or 25, and divine light twined all over his body, appearing very mighty. His face was full of arrogance, and his gaze swept over Ling Han and the others, his arrogance becoming even stronger. A group of country bumpkins who don't even have a carriage, could it be that you guys also want to attend Fairy Yi Yun's banquet? He asked. So what if I am? Ling Han said indifferently. Letting you country bumpkins attend the banquet is practically an insult to me. That young man said coldly. On top of that, you guys injured my coachman. If I don't make a move to teach you guys a lesson, how could it be justified? As expected, like master like servant. If he wasn't used to being arrogant and overbearing, how could that coachman just now directly attack and injure him without a second word? Ling Han cracked a smile, and said to Zhu Xian'er, encountering such an arrogant person, shouldn't you give him a beating? You should. Zhu Xian'er nodded with a smile. She naturally believed in Ling Han's strength. Even if they encountered a shattering void tier elite, didn't they still have the Black Tower? Moreover, Feng Piyun was Ling Han's sworn big brother, and even with the protection of a shattering void tier elite, he didn't see Ling Han being arrogant and overbearing, so how could others be worthy? I'm really curious. Where did you country bumpkins crawl out from? You don't even have a carriage, but you're also so arrogant. That really pisses me off. That young man leapt off the carriage. He strode forward majestically, his aura shocking. Don't say that I'm bullying you. My name is Zhuqiu Lucheng, he said proudly. Ling Han laughed and said, should I cooperate with you and show an expression of reverence? What, you actually haven't heard of this young master's name? Zhuqiu Lucheng was startled, and his gaze instantly became sinister. Unforgivable, you actually haven't heard of this young master's name. Xiao, he dashed out and attacked Ling Han. As he stretched out his right hand, silver light twined around it as if it became a metal arm. Moreover, it was continuously enlarging, and vein-like patterns intertwined, emitting a terrifying aura. In all honesty, this person's strength was truly strong, and could be considered at the top of the flower blossom tier. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. Ling Han very casually reached out and grabbed Zhuqiu Lucheng's chest, forcibly lifting him up. Under the latter's expression of disbelief, he waved his hand and slapped repeatedly. Pa, 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 the sounds of slaps rang out. Fuck, I can't beat you into submission, you son of a bitch, the ruffian rabbit shouted as it waved its little front paws, itching to charge up and fight. "Rabbit, speak more civilly, don't lead children astray." Ling Han turned his head and said. "Beat him, beat this bastard to death." Hunyo also hooted. The rabbit shrugged, meaning that it wasn't Uncle Rabbit who led the little girl astray. This was a violent maniac, and Uncle Rabbit's but full of teeth marks could prove it. Ling Han casually threw Zhuoqiu Lucheng to the side, and said, "This brat is right. If we take the carriage to attend the banquet, it feels like our status instantly rises by a few levels. Come, 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 everyone get on the carriage." "You!" Zhuoqiu Lucheng was half angered to death. These three people actually wanted to seize his carriage, so of course it was of a higher level. One had to know that this carriage was his family's antique, a treasure that had been passed down for several thousand years. Back then, it was Zhuoqiu family's ancestors' chariot when he followed a great elite to conquer the world. He was similarly terrified and puzzled. Ling Han was obviously in the flower blossom tier like him, but why couldn't he stand a single move in front of the ladder? Could such a guy be the greatest genius that directly entered the Restore Heaven Academy? But why hadn't he heard of it before? In his panic and rage, he even forgot how inconceivable it was that a rabbit could speak. Zhu Xian'er and Hunyo gladly sat on the carriage. The rabbit also wanted to get on, but was thrown in front of the carriage by Ling Han. When the earth-burst wolf that served as the legs saw it, it instantly howled and bit at the rabbit. "Damn you!" The rabbit hurriedly broke into a run. The earth-burst wolf chased, and the carriage instantly moved, speeding forward. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly, but he felt even more strange inside. Rabbit's strength was obviously superior to that of the earth explosion wolf that had just broken through to the flower blossom tier. As long as it emitted a bit of pressure, it would be able to suppress this beast wolf's soul and scatter. However, it still chose to run. This was to make Hunyo laugh. Could it be that the rabbit knew Hunyo's background? Otherwise, why would this ruffian rabbit treat Hunyo so well, not retaliating when hit or scolded, and only howling when bitten? Now, it didn't hesitate to pretend to be in a sorry state to make Hunyo laugh. The pitiful Zhuoqiu Lucheng was thrown by Ling Han, and not only were his clothes dirty, they were also torn. He had no choice but to take out new clothes from his spatial ring to change, crying out in anger as he changed. The carriage moved very quickly, and this place wasn't far from the side courtyard, so the carriage arrived in a short while. Ling Han tightened the reins, and that earth-burst wolf's expression twisted, its teeth popping out as it forcibly stopped in its tracks. It was still unconvinced, and wanted to turn around to bite, but Hunyo jumped out, both feet stepping on its head. It was already in a bad mood. Now that its head was being stepped on, it immediately wanted to bite this little human to death. However, before it could open its mouth, it sensed an incomparably terrifying aura. It was immediately frightened to the point where it lay on the ground and wagged its tail in a fawning manner. How was this still a wolf? It was obviously a stupid dog. Young Master Zhuoqiu. There were 4 sturdy servants and an old butler welcoming guests at the door. When the carriage arrived, they also walked over, but when Ling Han and the others actually walked out of the carriage, they couldn't help but feel strange. Wasn't this obviously the Zhuoqiu family's carriage? You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.